Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Series 6 of Working Hours, an oral history podcast about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours aims to record 200 loiners, that's people from Leeds, over the first half of the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. My mission here is to try to map out what my city, Leeds, a city that has declared a climate emergency, did during humanity's biggest emergency. On Working Hours, we hear how loiners have, are, and will be coping with our multiple and expanding crises during their day-to-day working hours. To tell this story, I need loiners like you, dear listener. I need people in Leeds or people from Leeds to come on this podcast and tell me about what they do all day and let me record how this decade affects us. Thank you for listening to this episode. You're listening to Series 6, Episode 22, and to my guest, Dr. Stewart Manning. This is another in-person recording, recorded on the 19th of June 2025. Hello, colleagues. In this deeply personal and insightful episode, Dr. Stewart Manning recounts his lifelong passion for medicine, shaped by childhood experiences and a genuine desire to care for others. From memorable stories about medical school pranks and meeting famous personalities while serving as the Leeds United doctor, to the impactful charity work he now pursues in retirement. This episode takes you through the highs and lows of a storied career. Learn how personal tragedies and professional challenges shaped Dr. Manning's approach to patient care and advocacy, and gain a greater understanding of the human side of medicine. Discover how he's continuing to make a difference through various charitable endeavours and the lessons he's learned along the way. Right, let's do this. Episode 177 of Working Hours with Dr. Stewart Manning. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Okay. I always wanted to be a doctor from 7 years old. And I asked my dad about it. And he said, when you were 7, he said, an elderly man fell outside where we lived. And you and I went and tidied him up and gave him a drink. And he said, I'd like to be a doctor when I grow up. And I think I was influenced in my youth by the television programmes. So things like Dr. Kildare, Emergency Ward 10, Dr. Finley's Casebook. But I always wanted to be a doctor, and I think I always cared about people. And I think that to be a doctor is probably the finest career that you can have. It's where you can have most influence on people's lives. The other reason, partly the influence, was my dad basically was a very, very intelligent man who served in India. When he came home, he wanted to go to university, but his family put him in the family business. So for him, for his sons, I'm one, and my brother became a pharmacist. For me to become a doctor was really important to him. And I was a bit wild when I was younger. I followed Leeds United everywhere, but he made sure I did my homework, you know what I mean? So, and the other thing he said was, and this is a link to the past, he always talked about the National Health Service and he said, I think back to when I grew up in Chapeltown. He was born in 1922. He said in those days before the health service, he said, if you went to the doctor or a doctor came out to you, they say it's 2 shillings and 6pence, but they always had a jar with them. And the jar was for you to put a threepenny bit in so that you could treat people who couldn't afford doctors. And that always stuck with me. So I think it was his finest moment. So the day I qualified, I actually reversed charges. So it said, there's a Dr. Manning ringing you from London. And what was really interesting is the way they gave you the results then. So in my day, you could do the exams from the university, but also you could do the Royal College exams. So you did those, and that was it made me work, because I did no work at all until about a year before I qualified, because you could then, they didn't really care. They were happy for you to go off and play rugby, cricket. So basically, the last part was surgical, and it was my exam was January the 1st. It was in the days when January the 1st wasn't a public holiday. So you do the clinical, and 2 weeks later you go back and you stand in this big room, And the guy at the top bangs his staff and says, right, I'm going to call the numbers. If you hear your number, come up and sign. If you don't hear your number, go out the back door. So that was how I found out I qualified. So I always wanted to be a doctor. It was something that, I don't know, there's nobody in my family before me did medicine. But it's something I just wanted to do, and it was the thing about it was it's a good career path. If you go to university and you go to study history, what do you do with it necessarily? But it was great, and I was trained at medical school in completely different times. It was a lot of fun. We did all sorts of naughty things. I mean, things that you'll get struck off for now. I mean, the people I trained with, you'd liked all of them. They're all characters. So at medical school, we did things. So some of the things we did was cling film. When cling film was invented, one night we went into the nurse's home, cling filmed every toilet seat, and waited, just sat there till they all got up for the early shift at 5 a.m, listened to the screaming. But I was always up for a challenge. So somebody said, we went, I know the exact day it was Princess Anne's 21st birthday. And we stood outside Buckingham Palace, and outside Buckingham Palace, Concorde flew over. So my friend said to me, he said, I bet you can't take these Japanese tourists on a tour. I did. So I held up my umbrella and said, so I took these Japanese tourists on a tour for about 2 hours, couldn't get rid of them. I thought, God, what am I going to do? So we ended up in a pub. And I was up for it, so I ended up in this pub. But fortunately, so I said, okay, we're halfway through the tour. This is the famous pub, don't you know what it was, where Wallace Simpson and Edward VIII used to have a drink at night time. So get yourself an English drink and rest for half an hour, we'll carry on. And we exited through the back door. So that was a sort of, it was, that was me. I mean, it was, I take life seriously, but there was some humour. Medical school was different.
Yeah.
Well,
they used to have a massive, medical students always had a reputation, didn't they? I remember 80s programmes and they're like, comedians would always be like, a bunch of medical students. And they were always the ones dressed up and doing the bed trolley runs and stuff.
But the thing about it was, I went to a very small medical school that's not there anymore, or Westminster. And I went to medical school in 1968. And the interesting connection was that the people who taught me, one of them had a knighthood, others had, different gongs. They'd actually operated on George VI in Buckingham Palace because he wouldn't go into hospital. So it was the links with the past, really. And the training was fantastic. They had the grand ward rounds then. And the grand ward rounds were very different. And we were the smallest medical school. It's not there anymore. It combined with Charing Cross and other medical schools. There used to be about 12 London medical schools. I think there's 3 or 4 now. And I just think of, it was different completely. And the best advice I ever had was from somebody called Sir Richard Bayliss. Sir Richard Bayliss became the Queen's physician. He was physician to the royal household when I went on the first ward round. And he said, I don't care what branch of medicine you're in, you have to be able to talk to people. So I've used that throughout my career. I never ever talk down to anybody, and I read the room. So some of the ward rounds are amazing. I think when you go on the ward, on our particular team, there were 2 Oxford students who were a nightmare. He would get to the end of a bed, would Sir Richard Bayliss, and he'd say, okay, let's hear this person's symptoms. He'd talk them through. And he'd say, now then, I won't mention the guy's name in case. He said, now then, he said to this, he said, what do you think it is? And he'd say, I think it's tropical spruce, sir. And he said, no. So this guy always came up with rare. So by the end of the ward round, he got him by the ear and he said, right, look out to that window, young man. He said, what do you see? Is it an albatross or a pigeon? But it got even better than that. So we went on these ward rounds. He liked me. My final comment from him in my thing was, Stewart Manning may not be the most dedicated student I've ever met, but I've had a fantastic time with him. So he said to me on one ward round, so he said, we'll call this guy Johnson, who done it. So he said, Manning, he said, at some point, you're going to have to learn about medicine. He said, what are you going to do when you're a houseman in 3 years? And you've got a problem. So I'm just going to ring Johnson, sir, because he knows the answer to everything. So that was medical school then. It was an amazing place. Yeah. Amazing place. They took people on different reasons. You went for an interview. You didn't have to be a 4A student, etc. But they were the best years of my life in terms of, and I'm still, there's half a dozen of us who were friends, and we meet up periodically. We met up in 2018, 50-year reunion since we started. We did it in London in 2023, 50 years since we qualified. We met up, so I kept in touch with them, and it was a great time. London was great then. It was the time when it was the 60s. It was the time when everything was changing. There was Carnaby Street, and I'll never forget. I mean, I went on an anti-Vietnam War march from London School of Economics. It went all the way to the American Embassy, which was, and every weekend in London you could see. I love music, and every weekend there was bands there. And to put it, my Westminster didn't have a pre-clinical school, so my pre-clinical was at King's in the Strand, and the King's Freshers' Ball was nice and family. I mean, wow. So it was great, and I had free concerts. I saw the Stones, the famous concert that they did in the park after Brian Jones died. I saw Blind Faith. But it was a fantastic time to be in London. It was exciting. There was a lot to do. And then one day you qualify and you end up on the wards, and you know it's different. You know, you're out. We went on a sort of a last holiday together to Malta. You know, you come back on the Saturday, then Monday morning you're on the wards, and suddenly you've got to take life seriously, and you're on your own. So it's quite a big culture shock. Yeah.
I would imagine then the change between coming from Leeds to London was a massive shock, because just the size of the place, and then the options of so many things going on and so much there must have been like really eye-opening. Of like, you know, because Leeds, and especially Leeds then, compared to that, you just think it's so sleepy comparatively.
I was lucky that there was 5 or 6 of us, and one of them had been the year before in London. He had to delay a year to get into medical school, so he worked in London. But he'd made all the contacts with everyone. So it was just unbelievable sort of place. It had a great atmosphere. It was just, I mean, it was, when you look back, and they would say, you know, if you can remember the 60s, you weren't there. It was a different sort of place. I mean, I don't, you know, back in the day, you know, we never touched hard drugs, but we were quite happy to have an odd joint. You know, I mean, I don't mind admitting that, and I'll never forget that I stopped the day I qualified because I thought a fine is one thing, the GMC is another. So we decided the last time I ever had a joint, and it's funny how you remember it. The hospital where I worked had a roof garden. And we were going to go to a concert at Charlton to see The Who. This was perhaps 74. So we had a few joints at the top before we went. I have no memory of the journey. You know, like 3 hours later, I'm suddenly in Charlton. But that was The Who, and that was amazing. I mean, music's been a part of my life. I mean, I'm so old that I went to the pre-runner of Glastonbury. There was the Bath Blues Festival in 1970, and I went to that. And one of the days was my birthday, so I had the biggest birthday party ever. But there's people like Led Zeppelin and the Mothers of Invention and all that. So and there was massive queues because they didn't expect that many people. So people just passed joints up and down the car lines. But it was a different world. You know, we never touched hard drugs. We had a good time, and we had all sorts of things that we did. There was an annual pantomime. It was a completely different thing. We were different people. You know, I think you'd say we had character as much as anything. And the medical school chose people not just on academic performance. So what they would do is Westminster Hospital had never won the Hospital's Cup rugby tournament, which is the oldest rugby tournament in the world. So what the dean did was he sent people to scout at places like Oxford and Cambridge. And so he imported some of the medical students who played in varsity games to come down. So I mean, it was some of the people who were part of the Hospital Cup team. Some of them were internationals and the rest of it. And you know, they finally won the cup. The year that they won the cup, one of my friends was actually the captain. So his career path went on for, you know, he was there. You can't do that anyway. It's anonymous. And the dean has sort of said to some of these guys, come and spend 3 years at Westminster, and you can have the best house jobs. I mean, if you did that now, you'd be hung, drawn and quartered. So it's a different time.
So when you qualified, was it straight into a hospital as a junior doctor and you have to do so many years?
Yeah, okay. So when I qualified, you had to do a year of registration. That's changed now. So I did 2 house jobs medical and surgical. And then at that time I wanted to do obs and gynae, delivering babies and things like that. So I went to UCH and I did that for a year. But I realised it was very, very competitive. It was very hard work and there's a lot of backbiting. So I thought I'm going to come home. So on the way home, I did a year of training as a GP. It's compulsory now. So I'd done my 2 years and then another year. And I did my year of training in Hemsworth. Oh my God. It's a culture shock. I mean, so you've come from London to Hemsworth. To put it politely, if you wanted to give Yorkshire an enema, that's where you stick the muscle. It was like, and I didn't understand what people said. People say, "Hey, I'm bringing in our Eric, he's Boltoning." That means vomiting. And the funniest story I can tell you about that was this woman came and sat with me. And bear in mind, I didn't have any formal training about general practice. And because I was at Westminster Medical School, all the things we saw were obscure. I hadn't seen any mainline illnesses. Yeah. And this woman came and sat with me and said, "Hey, doctor, I'm having problems with my visitor." And I said, "I've got a psychiatric case here." So she said, "No, my visitor." She said, "No, my monthly." She said, "My monthly visitor." And I said, "Oh." I mean, that.
Yeah, you could spend a long time working that out, couldn't you?
So she said, and in the end she said, "Yeah, my monthly visitor." And I think I said something like, "So he comes on a regular basis." I'm getting nowhere with this conversation. So I did that, but I always wanted to come home. Yeah. So because a lot of young people now don't, but there was my mum and dad here, my brother here, and my friends. And so I came home to Leeds. I did this year in general practice. I didn't like it. And basically, we used to cover for things like maternity. So I was in Hemsworth, we go to Pontefract. And guess who was a doctor working, I only found out 40 years later, who was a doctor working at Pontefract Hospital at that time? Harold Shipman.
Oh my God.
So he was there at the same time. So I didn't know that at the time, but so it came out when there were 12. And Harold Shipman, and they was working, I thought, oh my God. So I did that, but I didn't really, it was different. It was different. It wasn't because in fact, when I went to work in South Leeds, a lot of the people there had far more social problems. It was the years of the miners and the rest of it, but I did it. But I did a year there. I got a lot of experience and I came home to Leeds in 76. So at the time I came home, it wasn't easy to get a permanent job in general practice. So you're going back to, so I met my wife in 77. And thank God I met her after I'd left medical school, because if she'd met me when I was at medical school, she should have never married me. So we were getting married, didn't have a regular job. So to make sure one thing I've hated my whole life is debt. So to make sure I didn't get into debt, I worked full time for the out of hours service. So that was the original home visiting service. It started in Leeds. It's now all over the country. But I worked full time for them. So I did 40 hours a week. I did some in Leeds, some in Bradford. But in those days, you visited every single illness. So in that year, I did over 5,000 home visits. And I have the most fantastic experience. And I saw things in the time that people would never see now. And that's one of the problems is you have a lot of doctors now who basically work by guidelines. Whereas a lot of mine was intuition. Yeah. And I remember going back to Sir Richard Bayliss on the wars, and he said, the thing he said was, when you go into a situation, always take a minute to look around and see where you are. Yeah. So I went into this, I was doing a visit, and it was on Street Lane, there's a small hotel there. It was during the flu epidemic. And I'd gone to visit this guy, and he was really ill. And I thought, it's flu. And then in the corner, I looked around, there was a case that said BOAC. And I said, have you been anywhere? I said, yeah, I was in Nigeria recently. Malaria. Had I not? So it was, all these things came back time and time again to me. In fact, when you talk about how I learnt to talk to people, it comes out in the work I've done now. I mean, I'm very, very, because I spent a lot of my life later on when I was working for the out of hours service. Towards the end of my career, I did triage, which is where you bring people back. And every quarter, they basically chose 5 calls at random and you went through them. And very quickly, you learn not to swear, etc., and how to talk to people. And what I learned then has carried right on into the work that I've done. You know, I give a talk to people with learning disabilities, and I went to one in Holbeck, and everybody just sat with their arms folded looking at me. And then the guy at the front had a Leeds United t-shirt on. And I said, hey, do you support Leeds United? Yeah. I used to be the doctor, broke the ice. So it's finding some common ground. So I came back, I was in practice in Leeds I got permanent practice in 1978. Sorry, 78, 9. I got married. And I worked in that practice till 2012 when I retired and saw all the changes. And some of them were for the better. Not all of them are positive. I think the one thing that I had in my career as a doctor was I looked after whole families. So we didn't have a big list of patients, but I knew everybody. And the advantage of that is that when you go and see a doctor now, you go into a big surgery. In my surgeries, I've got 20,000 patients in Woodley there. You don't see the same doctor. But I knew people. So the advantage of that is that if somebody came in having had a baby and was a bit low, I think, I remember your mother had postnatal depression.
Yeah.
So these things do come back.
Yeah, you've got some continuity. And like you say with the house visits, of like you're seeing people in context, which is giving you more information about them, how they live, where they've been, you know, other potentialities of illness.
But there's no, I don't think you find anybody in Leeds, and it's not being, who had as many patient contacts as I did in my career. You know, we still, when I started as a GP, you could have surgeries of 40 plus people, open surgeries. But what has happened, and to be fair to GPs now, is when I started in general, like when I was back in Hemsworth, most of the problems took 5 minutes. You know, people would come in and say, can I have a repeat prescription for the pill? You did your blood pressure yourself. Can I have a sick note? Whatever. Whereas what happened when I was first a GP in Leeds, you referred everybody with asthma, diabetes, raised blood pressure to the hospital. Now GPs deal with it all. So the things that they do are far more complex. What is sad is that a lot of the GPs I know basically are really disillusioned. More and more of them are going. And I think the health service will change. I think that probably by the end, if the Labour Party stay in another decade, another term, I think that the way of being a GP will change. So instead of now, there are more and more salaried doctors who don't have ownership of the practices. I think in time it will be all salaried doctors, because then the government can specify what it wants people to do. And most doctors now are part-time. I worked 4.5 days in the practice, and every Sunday. A lot of them work 2 or 3 days. They have a much better work-life balance than I did, but they will never have the experience that I did. And the fact that you know the people, so you don't have to go through the whole preamble, and you know them well enough. And you say, how have you been since your holiday? It's starting with the personal element every time. You know, like, how's your granddaughter? And things like that.
Here's something I want to run by you before we move on to something else. So thinking about, I don't know if we mentioned it within this conversation, but we're talking about the COVID vaccine.
Yeah.
And, you know, like revolutions in medicine and stuff. And, you know, it's that thing where there's weeks where decades happen sort of thing. So do you think, what can you think of other points in your career where, or maybe even the beginning of the career, where like the information has been sort of updated, there's been a big change in the way that things are being done or thought about, but there's a lag in the profession of like getting everybody up to speed and like how the information kind of flows through these things.
Computerizing.
Right.
I mean, when I was first started, medical records are now fully computerized. That took a long time. And if you're somebody like me, who I'm not, you know, I can't type. So, but basically, towards the end of my career, you know, the information, it was easy to get information. You could actually look up things and the rest of it. So that was one bonus. But I was such a slow typer that the practice manager said to me, I don't mind you touch typing like that, but can you use one finger from each hand? And then all prescriptions were computerized. But to give you instances which are probably more interesting than that, when I was at University College Hospital in 1974 to 75, they just started using the ultrasound in obstetrics. Now, look what it's used for. But to put it in context, my daughter did GCSEs in did GCSEs in 2020, and in the GCSE O-level, there was a question about ultrasound. So that's how it changed. And I think it's not just, it's the whole, technology has a lot of advantages, which is saying, if I look back on my career, and it's some of the things have been fantastic, the treatments are fantastic, but the actual way that people doctor, if you like, and actually talk to people. I went with my wife to see a specialist. He never looked off from the screen.
Yeah.
And you have to read people. And if you say, have there been any, COVID was the biggest turning point in my life, I would say, in terms of, go and close the door.
It's all right, I can push it too.
Yeah, I'm just conscious of the...
background noise. Well, we'll pick up other people's conversations and then we can broadcast them to the world.
So basically, I'm amazed. And when I was at this cancer meeting, I think I did it last week, I was speaking to an oncology professor who said, we've made more advances from 2020 to 2025 than we did in the first 20 years of this millennium. So things have changed. And the thing about it when you're doctoring is you become, it gets to a stage where it overtakes you. You know what I mean? I knew by the end of my career that it was time to, apart from the fact that I wanted to retire. I mean, it was a great story actually. I was off work for 4 months. As I said, I went back. And the lady doctor who'd done my locum work, I just clicked with her. And she was unlike a lot of locums that she really cared. And she knew I'd been ill, so she never went home before she'd actually seen that the work was done. And I'm having coffee with her one lunch. And I said, hey, what are you doing with your life? She said, I think I need a regular job. I said, you want mine? She said, can I think about it? She said, I've thought about it, yes, but I'll take your job on one condition. That's that you retire. And I thought, yay. So I'm still friendly with her.
Yeah.
And she's disillusioned. But the thing that finally came, one instant that made me realise I was past my sell-by date was, when you look after terminally ill patients, you use something called a syringe driver. So you have this little white book, so you have to convert the oral medication and packages they're on to drugs for the syringe driver.
Right.
So in my last month, I went all around my palliative care patients to say goodbye. And we went to one, and she saw me struggling, and I'm thinking, and in 1 minute, she'd managed to convert the tablets to and I thought, this is it, time to go. So I think I'm excited by the changes. They're not all for the better. Some of the changes you say have come in that have altered things drastically. For most of my time as a GP, I could refer people to who I wanted, and I could get onto them on the phone. They brought this thing called choose and book, which you may be aware of. So choose and book means that that the patient has to go online, and they could get options. So they might say you can go to Bradford in 8 weeks. But the problem with that is that often the lowest waiting lists are for the least popular doctors. And if you came to me, or if you said to me, Stuart, it's nice to meet you, can you recommend an orthopaedic surgeon? I like to be able to do that. And in that time, I couldn't recommend patients of specific people. It was kind of difficult. And they also got tougher on referrals. Towards the end of my career, they started bringing guidelines for prescribing, for referring, and I hated it. I was more, I would look at things empirically and the rest of it. So,
but you had more autonomy as well. It was like, it was up to you to,
correct.
Like, you were the expert, you were trained in it, you knew, and you didn't have someone who was not trained and did policy stuff.
Yeah, so
telling you what to do.
So during Choose, so basically we had 4,000 plus patients, 2 male doctors, in an area that had a lot of Southeast Asian and Muslim patients. So obviously, our gynae referral rates, because they didn't want men to examine them, were through the roof. So the person who was like sent in as a hatchet person sort of said, Dr. Manning, we're really not happy about the amount of referrals you make to gynae. And I said, but I have to. She said, okay, I understand that. She said, but you have a very high referral rate for pigmented lesions, things like. So she said, I want you to go on a course. So I said, okay. So I went on this course, whole day Saturday, at the Thackeray Museum. It was done by the Professor of Dermatology. So 20 slides at the beginning, I got 12 right. 20 slides at the end, I got 8 right. So I mean, I've been not a rebel, but I like to be autonomous. And when I've done things, projects, etc., I'm not a very good team player to the extent of I like to do things and get on with it, you know, and I can rely on my own ability. It's not being arrogant, but I just get things done.
So before I move us on to something else, and you've mentioned it already, and I'll probably get some kind of comment. Well, maybe I should just ignore it and actually get some comments. But yeah, I think we need to talk about your time at Leeds, being the doctor for Leeds United.
Absolutely.
So how did that come about? How was that? How long did you do that for?
Did it for 12 years.
Yeah.
So basically, in those days, a lot of club doctors were associated with practices. And so I got a single-handed practice in 1979. Then amalgamated with another doctor, and he was the Leeds United doctor. So I did that from 1978/9 until 1990, and I had some amazing experiences through it. It was great. It's very glamorous when you think about, you know, doing first team football, and lots of that time Leeds were in the second division as it was then. But it's not glamorous when you sat on a miserable November night watching the reserves play.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was.
So you just have to be there in case when they're around.
Have to be there. I mean, I had some great experiences. I'll never forget when Alan Clark was the manager. He let us go on the team coach to places, which was great. And my brother went with me, and me and my brother, we went to Old Trafford, and we got there about 1:00. And it was a day when it had snowed in Leeds, but as soon as you got over the Pennines, it was great. So we go, he says, I'll see you in an hour or so, lads. So we went upstairs, and we went to the director's lounge, and we sat at a table like this. And this guy says, you can't sit there. It's Martin Edwards' table. I said, but he's not here. You can't sit there. Anyway, we watched the game, and basically it was the last time Leeds won a league game at Old Trafford. February 1981, Brian Flynn scored. Trouble was that when he scored, we jumped up in the director's box. So that was one incident that's funny. I met Brian Clough doing it.
Nice.
I met all sorts of different people. Another incident was quite funny was I went to playoff games. So Leeds in 1987, basically, got to the playoffs, which if they'd won, they'd got promoted. But it was at Birmingham, and the trouble was at Birmingham 2 years before, the Leeds fans had caused problems and somebody died. So one of our players got injured, called Brendan Ormsby, and I went on the pitch. 2 policemen carted me off the pitch, and then the chairman said, no, he's our doctor. So, I mean, I met all sorts of stories. I mean, there's certain people, players, that I have a great deal of time for. One was Kevin Keegan. So we're playing Newcastle. It's the first game of the season, and after about 60 minutes, the Newcastle goalkeeper hurts his arm. So I go on and look at him, and I said, he's dislocated. And Arthur Cox was the manager, said, don't be so bloody silly, he's playing on. Anyway, played on for about 5 minutes. Arthur Cox brought him off, and I was sorting him out at the end, and Kevin Keegan came in and said, I'm sorry, Doc, about that. And then he went outside, and he signed every autograph. So the game had finished at quarter. He was still there 2 hours later. Amazing. And then about, I don't know what year it was, I'm sorry, but it was the year that they had a testimonial for Don Rebbing, because he had motor neuron disease. And all the old players were there. And things sometimes come back in your memory. I think the saddest sight for me was all the old players pushing Don Rebbing out onto the pitch in a wheelchair. I'll never forget that. Anyway, at the end of the game, Kevin Keegan comes around and says, hey Doc, how much do I owe? He said, you don't owe me anything. He says, right, I'm going to take you round and I'll get every player to sign your programme. And also, we're having an event at the Queen's Hotel, please come back. But the thing that was striking about Kevin Keegan was when you have a testimonial, the expenses usually come out of the fund. He paid everybody's expenses himself. Everybody. So I have a great deal of time. I mean, I met some footballers who weren't so nice, but it was you know, growing up, I've been a Leeds United supporter from very early days. In fact, it wasn't that long ago, I went out with a friend of mine, somebody I'd known from school, from about 1961, and we're around the corner at a restaurant. It's May the 1st. He says, hey Stewart, do you remember what we were doing 60 years ago today? I said, no. He said, we were at Wembley watching Leeds and Liverpool. For me, becoming the club doctor was fantastic. And I did it. I had a lot. The only problem with it was that because you're the club doctor, people wanted to get tickets. So the problem I had was we got to a semi-final at Hillsborough 2 years before the Hillsborough disaster. And I managed to, we went on Park and Ride, and I got about 30 tickets for people. It took me the next 10 years to get the money back. Another interesting thing about when I was there was, there was a manager, Howard Wilkinson, very dour, you know, very intense. I'll never forget, I think it was Stuart Hall on the radio said, he said, Howard Wilkinson wasn't here today. I understand he's gone into hospital for a charisma transplant. But the serious side was, I was doing a game. Sometimes the manager always liked you to come in to the dressing room at half time, knowing to go out again. I've been on holiday, so at the end of the game, he says, how are you, Doc? He says, do you want a drink? I said, I'm not. I said, don't you know? He said, no, what? And he wasn't aware during the game of the Hillsborough disaster. Mm-hmm. So he said, right, I'm going back into the players, I want you to come with me. He spoke for 10 minutes. I don't think I've ever heard anybody speak with such emotion, because he was the manager at Sheffield Wednesday. It went on, and then what happened, we got promoted in 1990, but the club decided, basically, that they wanted somebody with qualifications. So mine was just experience. So I still kept going. I went for many years. We went as a family. Mm-hmm. Then my dad passed away. My daughter went to uni. So I stopped going for a while. But now my brother's got 6 season tickets, and I'm a member. So I go to about half a dozen games a year. And really interestingly, about 6 weeks ago, the charity that I work for, we're funded, as I said, by the West Yorkshire and Harrogate Cancer Alliance. They were approached to see if we had any tie-ups and could work with them. Mm-hmm. So we haven't had a follow-up yet, but we went to Elland Road to have a meeting, and what's happened since I was last there? We were upstairs in a room where one of the boxes where you can go to the toilet where you haven't got a queue of 150 people. And then I went around the ground, they took us on a tour, and amazingly, it completely changed. The dressing room was different. But what impressed me about Leeds United, and they don't publish it enough, is how much work the Leeds United Foundation does with the community. We may work with them, I don't know, but things like, we went in the dressing room, and every Wednesday they have an hour's coffee cup in that waiting room, in the changing room for people, and it's veterans. So they come in and have a chat. They do lots of coaching and 3 days for kids who live in tower blocks. And I don't think they get enough publicity for that. Most footballers are decent people. They earn a lot of money, and I must be honest, at times, some footballers are more in a year than I earned in a lifetime of medicine. But now I think some of the wages are ridiculous, but I still love football. When they sort of got promoted, and then recently, when they got the winning goal, I jumped out of my chair. I was with my brother in 1992. In 1990 got promoted, basically. And we were at Sheffield United. And my brother was so excited when the winning goal went in that he sort of fainted. And then as we drove back, we heard the Liverpool beat Manchester United. So by the time we got home, we're the champions. Yeah. But all sorts of stories. Like footballers actually are very decent people. The most decent one I've met, apart from Kevin Keegan, was Vinnie Jones. Yeah, Vinnie Jones was unbelievable. I mean, he was like, there's something about him.
You'd be spoiling his image here.
No. He used to live around the corner from me, where I used to live. But he was always the first. There was a young lad who'd gone to Hull and had an accident, and at the football, and was in a coma. Vinnie Jones was the first person to volunteer to go and talk to him in his coma. He was just funny. I remember talking to him. I said, and he was the one. Every time they went to an away game, I was at Barnsley with the team. He went out 20 minutes early, all the people, and he went and said hello to every one of the disabled people in a wheelchair. I said, Vinnie, you remember? He said, not really. He said, what's not to like about being a footballer? He said, 6 years ago, I was a hog carrier. And he's very, very charitable as well. Amazing character. I mean, they're interesting people, but they're possibly not as much character as back in my days when I went, but they're amazing people. And they have, I think, for a city the size of Leeds, I think we need a Premiership team. And I think the knock-on effect from that is it brings a lot into the city. When they redevelop the ground, they'll get people coming abroad for weekends, staying in hotels.
Yeah. So where do I want to go? So we've kind of done the how you got into it. Let's jump into what you're doing now, because we can always come back and revisit the other stuff.
Okay.
So what are you doing now then?
What I do, we'll go back a bit. So as I told you, I was burnt out when I retired. So it took me a couple of years to actually feel human again. Not, I'd been ill, I talked about the problems I'd had, but it took me quite a while. I mean, I'm an avid reader. I didn't read a book for 3 years.
Yeah.
But so gradually, then I like people, and I want to put something back. So I started doing a bit 2015. Couldn't do as much because my grandson was born in America, and I used to go over 3 or 4 times a year. I go over less now because he's at school. And then my charity journey started when I was approached by a friend of mine. His son had died of motor neuron disease. And basically, his son set up a charity before he died. It's called the Robert Sinclair Davidson Foundation. And I started volunteering with them in terms of, I'm quite happy to rattle buckets and things like that. But then I went out as sort of an ambassador. So I got into places like St. Gemma's and places like that. So because they were short of referrals, and some of the referrals are really interesting. The charity they do small things, they do large things. They would basically fit wet rooms in people's houses. They bought equipment. At the time, I was approached by somebody whose friend was probably early 40s with stage 4 breast cancer, and they were desperate to go to Disneyland in Paris. So they funded that. They don't fund holidays anymore. And I'm still in touch with her at the moment. Small things that makes a difference to people.
Yeah.
So I started working with them. In the end, it just didn't work out. It was not for any reason. I don't just, and I have to be in charge of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So on the basis...
Well, you're used to a lot of autonomy, aren't you? So it's kind of like...
But I had some great experiences with that in terms of... One example was, in Leeds, the HSBC used to sponsor a cycle race. Do you remember that?
Rings a vague bell.
Yeah. So we had a stall there. We weren't collecting, and somebody came up to me and said, I'd like to talk to you about my friend. And this lady was a doctor. She's got asbestosis. And she'd got asbestosis working in hospitals in Scotland.
Wow.
Where the roof's blowing and the rest of it.
Yeah.
And so, to cut a very long story short, the charity supplied her with an electric bike, because the electric bike, so she loves cycling. So for the last 9 months of her life, she would go out and about.
Yeah.
And I met her once and only once, and I didn't meet her again because unfortunately she deteriorated. But she was somebody who, unbelievable lady. In fact, I was talking about her yesterday. She was a lady who did immense work and got awards with people with HIV. And I was talking yesterday because I was giving a talk to this group of people with HIV, and they'd heard of her, and some of them had met her. But the thing that comes back afterwards about St. Gemma's was that we then went back within about 6 months. We stopped working for the charity, but my brother and I decided that we still wanted to work for St. Gemma's. And when we went back again, we had this meeting, and one of them there was, she said, Stewart and Michael, you have no idea what difference that bike made to that lady. And it's led to what I do now. And so basically, we did a lot of things with Connect with St. Gemma's. So it was my brother's idea, but we set up a fund before COVID with our own money. And the fund pays for things at the end of life that St. Gemma's can't.
Yeah.
So it's like a family hardship fund.
Yeah.
And basically, it's gone down that well at St. Gemma's that they ring fence £5,000 every year, and we pay off what we can. And it's interesting. The things it's done are just... I'm quite proud of it, because it's done things that somebody came from Sunderland to the Bexley wing for treatment for recurrent brain tumour.
Right.
Too ill to have the treatment, too ill to go home. They ended up in St. Gemma's. And when she got to St. Gemma's, she wasn't going to last the weekend. the family couldn't afford the train fare from Sunderland, so we paid that.
Yeah.
Yeah, things like, it does all sorts of things, like it. But I think to Christians,
it's just so important though as well. And like going back to COVID, and it's come up time and again, but all those people that, all the funerals that people couldn't go to and all the things that like, people didn't get that closure and, what you think about closure, but like the whole thing of just like, it's so important.
Yeah, so basically, it comes from the fact, I'll come back to it, that from my experience, the person who has the illness moves on, to put it politely. It's their last illness, and it's how the relatives perceive it. So when I retired, several people came and said to me, Dr. Manning, we want to thank you for what you did for my grandmother 30 years ago. So it was actually, I took pride in what I did. I would sit with people who were terminally ill. So with St. John's, other things. Elderly lady, 93, not going to live to Christmas. We paid for somebody to write her Christmas cards and send it. And it's small things. Yeah. And it's really for emergencies. But it's basically, we had raised a lot of money for St. Gemma's before COVID. And but they rang me during COVID and said, do you mind if we use some of this money for counselling? Because a lot of people are not spending the end of the days with the relatives. So we did that. So it's done all sorts of things. I think that it had run out of money. Before they put the money in, it got to March and it run out of money. So I got a phone call from the hospice. Dr. Manning, yeah. I said, please. They said, we've got 2 elderly people in here who they're terminally ill, but it's probably going to go on a year or so. They're in the hospice. Basically, the family want to paint their apartment. They can't afford the paint. So I just pay for it. It's like, it's empowering. And in my philosophy is that when you do something for people who can never pay you back, that's like the highest honour you can have. And it's worked well. So I'll come on to the other charities. So this year, people buy into it. So if I said to you, I'm raising money to pay the electricity bills at St. James's, but people buy into it. People buy into the fund. And the ice cream parlour down at Moortown Corner?
Yep, Sundays, yeah.
Yeah, Sundays. So 2 years ago, the lady who runs it approached me to mentor one of the young girls she had in there going to medical school.
All right.
So I mentored her for a year. And then they ring me January the 1st this year, or 2nd, and said, Dr. Manning, we're going to close for the winter on Sunday the 3rd of January, and we'd like to donate all the proceeds to your fund at St. John's. Sunday comes and it was the one day we had snow, so I couldn't get there. But they raised £1,500.
Yeah.
And then they match funded it. So that's £3,000.
Yeah.
So basically that money has gone in, and it means that we've got even less to pay off this year. But it does things that it's difficult to explain, but small things that make a difference.
Yeah, and the important thing, and that time is so stressful, but in a lot of ways. So I can directly, like a relative of mine died a couple of years back and managed to get into St. Gemma's, and at the point where he was in St. Gemma's was such a relief of just everything else that we'd had to go through and he'd had to go through up until that point, and then just being somewhere where it was in one place, people were able to see him, and like that took so much pressure off of just everything that you were trying to organise before, like trying to organise his care and make sure that they kept continuity. And
with the work I've done, I've been to hospices all over Yorkshire. Some are good, some are bad, but St. Gemma's has something about it, and I don't know what it is. And it gives me a reality check sometimes. So I volunteer for the events because I like talking. And I was doing the open gardens a week last Saturday, and it's raining, and I'm moaning. And then the sun came out, and 2 patients were pushed in wheelchairs into the garden. I thought, Stewart, get a life. Yeah. And so I go out rattling tins, I give out leaflets, I help at the balls. In terms of the work I've done during COVID, basically, it was a nightmare for me because I spent so much time inside. And so I ended up getting on a lot of Zoom calls and things like that. And so before COVID, I joined this charity, Yorkshire Cancer Community, which I'm now chairman of. And we're a charity that goes out and gives talks about cancer and well-being, know your own body. And we give it to all sorts of different organisations. I'm proud of the work we've done with people with learning disabilities. We now have an easy read version. So if English isn't your first language, we use the easy read version with an interpreter. But the sort of, like I said to you, and I'm not, again, it's making small steps. Nobody can ever measure what we do. But if somebody came to my talk yesterday, in 20 years' time thinks, oh, I've got a lump in my breast and does something, then I'm winning. And that came out to some extent. My mum had a fairly grim end of life. She had dementia. She had breast cancer that was eating away at her. So if I can prevent anybody going down that road, I will. So over time, I've got to a stage where I think I probably need to spend more time at home some of the time. But I've been to a lot of conferences. I've started working with other charities. So I work with St. Gemma's is my passion. I raise money for them, and this year I'm 75 in June, which is next week. And so my best friend died in America last year. He was my best man. He gave the worst best man speech you've ever heard. My daughter got married in America, and her wedding was in New Jersey. That's where she lives. And the backdrop was sort of Manhattan and everything. Fantastic. He arrived. He arrived on his boat. He was kind of, I loved him to bits. He was a bit of a Walter Mitty, but I loved him to bits. He passed away in America. And basically, so what I've done for my 75th birthday is I'm raising money to buy a riser recliner chair in St. Gemma's in his memory. And I'm putting a leaf up. So, I'll raise what I can, the rest I'll put into it. I suppose I'm lucky that I don't have any financial problems. But the work that I do in terms of, you asked me what charity work I do, a lot of it, for instance, Macmillan is an organisation that I've always had great admiration for. And it goes back to, after my dad died, I went back to work and I couldn't cope. I didn't get as bad as I was with him, but I couldn't cope because I've looked after my dad who was dying of stomach cancer. There's people coming in with coughs and colds. So a Macmillan, we had a monthly meeting with a Macmillan nurse, which was to discuss all our palliative care patients, which people at the end of life. And she said to me, are you all right? I said, no. So she took me in another room and she said, right, Stewart, what I want you to do, what's the problem? I said, I can't get this vision of my dad's last 3 months sat in a chair. She said, okay, I want you to go home and each night I want you to sit in a room. I want you to listen to some music and just remember happy days. And that's worked for me. And the other thing I did was I sold the chair and got rid of it. But so that's what I tell people to do. It's so the next step was my best friend died of pancreatic cancer. And you've probably heard the story in my podcast. But basically, he phoned me from the Bexley wing, and I couldn't visit him because of COVID. I'd gone and stood in the garden and talked to him. And it was a Tuesday night, it was like 11 o'clock. I think it was fairly high on pain relief. And he said, hey, Doc, you've been a good friend, at which point he starts it. And he said, I wish I hadn't had the treatment. And that was why I started working with Pancreatic Cancer UK. So I've done a lot of work for them. I helped them when they launched a new pathway. A lot of the other work I do, which is, there's a limit to how much time I can be away from home. But a lot of the work I do is I'm the patient representative for different organisations. So when they say there's a new trial at the moment where they're looking at using AI, pancreatic cancer. In pancreatic cancer, when you get the diagnosis, some people are operable. When they actually operate on people, when they look at the anatomy, they can't basically operate. So that's 25% of people. So there's a new project using AI to get better results, to try and get this down to 5 or 10% people. So I will look at the trial details and put it into English and things. I hate acronyms. Acronyms is something that drives me bloody mad, excuse me. I went to another professor called Professor C. Bagontefiore in Leeds, who's now a professor. He looks after my dad when he was an ordinary consultant. And he said, I'd like you to be part of our organisation. So he told me in what way. So I went to a meeting, and it was a 3-hour meeting at the Thackeray Centre. I didn't understand a word of it. I hate acronyms. I absolutely loathe them. So typical example, it'll say, and you may need a CT scan. Okay. So I say to him, A, you need to explain what it stands for, and B, let people know it's not an MRI scan, because people hear bad stories about MRI scans. So I do things like that. I did a lot of work for Pancreatic Cancer UK. I did fit, but I don't charge for any of the work I do, not a penny. The only thing I sometimes do is, if it's a big expense, say it's train fare, hotel, I will say to them, right, these are the bills, I put it in, they give me the money, and I donate it back, and they gift aid it, so they make a profit on it. Because it isn't fair. I'm well enough off financially to basically, it's not fair. Sometimes it's a bit embarrassing, because some of the things I go to, the round table meetings, they can say, and we'll pass around the sheet and you can put in expenses for £25. And I can't openly say in front of it, because it sounds like I'm a millionaire. I just don't, because it's not worth it. And also I'd rather the charity have the money. So Pancreatic Cancer UK, I've done work with them. I went to a meeting there's a charity called Cancer 52, and it's a charity that looks after people with rarer cancers. Because if you think about it, breast, lung, prostate, bowel, they're 5 of the most common cancers, and they get most of the money spent on. If you're a drug company, you're not going to spend £20 billion on a treatment that might be used for 10 people.
Yeah.
So basically, Cancer 52 basically promotes all these rarer charities. I went for a meeting for that. I went to a Macmillan meeting in Manchester. We actually met a health minister who came along. It was looking at the voluntary sector. If there wasn't a voluntary sector, God knows what state the NHS would be in.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mentioned working at NIHR, and all the work that they do with volunteers for the research and stuff, and they obviously promote research to a lot of people. But it is like so much of it is reliant on just people volunteering their information and wanting to help other people and believing in like the goodness of it.
I mean, St Gemma's wouldn't mind me telling St Gemma's, because it's had a lot of affluent people. They get left a lot in legacies and things like that. So it costs them about £13-14 million to run for a year.
Yeah.
The government doesn't give them a lot, but they said if they had to pay the minimum wage to volunteers, I mean, they've got 25, 26 shops, it would cost them 1.4 to 5 million a year. So the health it was quite good. Sitting on tape, at the end you had a chance to ask the health minister questions, and she was a good talk to the politicians. And I said to her, can I ask you a question, Minister? Yeah. I said, when we're talking about the 10-year plan, are we talking about what's going to happen for the next 10 years? Or is it going to take 10 years to implement it? So I do that. So what else have I got involved in? A lot of things, I'm happy to do as much as I do things I go to webinars, but I do a lot of things online, etc. The latest charity I've started working for, this is quite a good story, is that like you look on LinkedIn, I saw this charity, and it's called the Ella Dawson Foundation, and it hit an accord with me. So basically, the Ella Dawson Foundation was set up by Ella Dawson, and she had a very rare form of leukemia, and she sadly passed away. But she felt that there weren't the right sort of services for young people. So what I'm saying to you is that I don't mean in terms of clinical services, but she thought 18 to 30 will be more emphasis on diet and exercise and all these things. So they set up this charity. It's amazing. It's only been going 4 years, and basically it's paid for a complementary therapist at the cancer hospital in Manchester, the Christie.
Right.
So I saw it, and I got in touch with them, and they came and met me here. We had a chat. So I volunteered. First thing was I volunteered at their ball, which was in the Queen's Hotel. They put me on meet and greet. I mean, wow, I had a fantastic time. So I stood at the bottom of the steps. It was a bit like an air hostess saying, to the right are the toilets and where you hang your coats. To the left is the table plan. Behind me, you go up the stairs and get a drink. But I really clicked with them. And I'll tell you a story that's quite interesting, which comes to it. But the people, I like people. They've had 4 years to set up this charity, and it's going well. Obviously, when you have a charity like that, you've got 3 strands to it. 1, raising money. 2, spending money. And 3, keeping the name of the Ella Dawson going. When I was at medical school, and I forgot to tell you, on the Westminster Children's Hospital was Anthony Nolan. I met Anthony Nolan, and I met his mother. His mother was the most frightening woman you've ever met. but look what she's done. I mean, the guy downstairs here where I live had a bone marrow transplant. So that's linked. So I went and helped it. Anyway, when you're a doctor, certain patients stay in your mind.
Yeah.
And so this is a true story, and I looked after this little. I diagnosed his leukemia. Then he had the treatment. Then he had a bone marrow transplant. But the bone marrow transplant, basically, most bone marrow transplants fail because your body rejects it. This is the opposite. The bone marrow transplant attacked his body.
Right.
So he had, it left him 4'6". He had an awful time. But I got on very well with him. I managed to, he came and saw me once a month, every 2 months. Anyway, when he passed away, his mum came to see me. And I'll show you before you go. She said, Steve's left you this in his will. And he'd left me this alien, I'll show you it, and the letter that I still have that says, Dr. Manning, thank you for always treating me like an adult. You're one of the good guys. So anyway, moving on. So the Ella Dawson Foundation, I volunteer with them. So I've come up with this idea that they're going ahead with. So basically, what I've suggested is that they run a T-shirt competition. So in August, people will be able to get a T-shirt for £10, and they basically will have a picture taken at the most unusual place, and there'll be a panel who will decide, what the most unusual place is. It might be on top of the Eiffel Tower, who knows? But I am sponsoring the competition in this little boy's name. I'm putting the money in for the prizes. And I've spoken to his mother, and his mother, won't meet up with me because it reminds her too much.
Yeah.
That's the end.
That's awesome.
And that's my mantra.
Yes. Yeah, you said that on the...
So
I will read it out because it's an audio medium. As one person, I cannot change the world, but I can change the world of one person.
Yeah, I believe that. And so this little boy had a great influence on me. He never moaned, you know what I mean? And so it was difficult because when I was given that, and the thing about that is he left things for specific people in his will. So that was the first thing he ever bought with his spending money. He bought it in Bridlington, but I don't know. One of my grandchildren says, I've got to leave it to them. So I suppose but it's my tribute to him. The only way I can come to terms with grief and things like that is to do something positive.
Well, and I suppose this was something that I wanted to ask you about as well. I mean, with both parents getting cancer, what are your feelings on that? Is that something that preys on you? Are you particularly worried about cancer? Do you think do you know the circumstances of why they had it, or do you have a theory of why it was both?
It's life. 1 in 2 people will get cancer.
Yeah.
And so it happens.
It used to be 1 in 3, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But the thing about that is about cancer now, and it's part of the talk I give, is that 40 years ago, 25% of people lived for 10 years with cancer. It's now 50%. Yeah. And things are getting better. My concern, if you ask me about COVID, is that I don't think we'll see... Look at survival rates in cancer. So, if you have bowel cancer, you've got an 80% chance of living 5 years. My concern is that because of COVID and delays in all these things, we might find that the rates get worse. But it's not just detection rates, it's the treatment. Yeah. And it's also the quality of the treatments. A lot of people now don't have chemotherapy, have immunotherapy. And then like this lady who I talked about, who I was on the phone to today, who had breast cancer and was sort of told it's terminal. She's gone on for 5 or 6 years, which is why I have to try and put a positive spin on it to the extent of, I always say my things, I want people to get the best that they can out of their life. Yeah. And part of early diagnosis, the government wants it because the earlier you diagnose, the less it costs them. But it's the stress it puts on your family. So basically, if you're diagnosed early, you may just have an operation or whatever. If you wait till the cancer's spread, you end up having lots of treatment. And I think what is interesting is another organisation that I had some dealings with, it's called Cancer Support UK. Amazing organisation, and they have 2 streams. One is they have a stream that trains people how to talk to their employees with cancer. Very interesting how they do that. The other thing is they have people have to pay for that, but they have a free scheme, which is basically where people, when they finish their treatment, whether it's, as long as it's not stage 4, which means it's towards the end of life, people basically can sign up for they have 6 1-hour sessions, and it's done online. And the thing that I think people don't realise is that you have all this treatment and then suddenly it finishes. And people describe dropping off because they don't know where to go, what to do. And they come home and say and they say, great, you finished treatment, but you may not be cured. And the other thing that I think is even more upsetting is there's something called survivor guilt. So basically you've had your breast operation in a hospital with a lady in the next bed.
Yeah.
You've had treatment, but she doesn't survive.
Yeah.
So that's something that works very well.
Well, it's the why me thing, isn't it? Why did I get it? Why did I survive it?
Yeah. So if you talk about the influence, the only way, as I said, the only way I can come to terms, and it's not just my parents. You know, I lost my friend with pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
My friend in America had something that was really rare that I'd never seen, but it wasn't a form of cancer. There was a guy who lived upstairs from me who moved out, and he had pancreatic cancer. The other thing I did is, another amusing story is, my wife goes to a regular hairdresser. So I went to collect her one day and the boss says, "You're the man." I was like, oh my God. She said, "My friend here wants to run a marathon, but she can never get a place." So I rang Pancreatic Cancer UK and said, "Can you do something for me? Can I have a place in the marathon?" So this lady ran the marathon in memory of my friend, and she raised £3,500.
Yeah.
When I give my money to charity or whatever, I'm using the money that my mum and dad left me. And so it's not a form of guilt. I just think they'd be proud of me, you know, because it's putting the money to some use. And as I explained to you, you don't have to spend a lot to make a difference. I don't support many big charities. I support St. Gemma's, but only because I know where my money's going. So, you know, like, if it's a specific, if you said to me, I've got a project on, we're trying to do blood, and it was a specific project, I'll give you a donation, but I will not donate to the big charities because it just gets lost in the ether.
Yeah.
So, and also when I raise money, my brother raised money, he raised over £1,000 last year for our fund. People know where it goes.
Yeah.
And so it's empowering for people. So yeah, I mean, so that's what I've done at the moment with these different charities. I just need projects. I mean, like I said to you before, going back, my father always talks about Arthur Louis Aaron. Arthur Louis Aaron was the pilot who got the VC posthumously. He was the only VC in Leeds in the Second World War.
And we have a statue of him.
Which is where we're coming to. So basically, you know, because I like a project, my dad, he was, basically I have a great deal of respect for people like Arthur Louis Aaron, because I think if it wasn't for people like him, we wouldn't have the freedoms today. So it starts off with people talking, people didn't think that on the roundabout there was an appropriate place for him. And it was actually came about because the Yorkshire Evening Post, somebody decided to fund the statue. And
it was for the millennium, wasn't it?
Correct. So they have this vote, and amazingly, Arthur Louis Aaron won it, which is crazy because nobody had ever heard of him. I think it was skewed, should we say.
Well, it will have been one of those things where the people that found out about it were the people, you know, that thought of that.
Yeah, but the thing was, at the time, Don Revie.
Yeah. But we got a Don Revie statue.
Yeah, but I'm amazed, and thank God they didn't. There could have been a Jimmy Savile statue.
Oh, God.
Yeah, exactly. So they did it, and part of the reason, they did it, and they put it there. Most people, I've gone past it hundreds of times. I've never seen anybody look at it.
I have. I've been on the roundabout. I've been up close to it.
You went to look at it?
Yeah.
When?
Years ago. Over, like, probably 2 decades ago.
You're the first person I've ever met who did that. So what the big...
I was always fascinated by that roundabout, though. You know, like, because I remember it being the petrol station.
It's listed. It's listed. It's the only petrol station on a roundabout.
Yeah.
So Arthur went to Round A School, and then I heard somebody said to me, "I think we should try and move the statue." So I said, "Okay." So to start the story, I went in front of Leeds City Council and made the proposal to move the statue. We had a few meetings, and basically we weren't going to move it. The guy who paid for it wanted it to stay there because the idea was back in 2000, that was all going to be pedestrianised with statues.
Yeah.
Never happened.
Yeah.
So the guy who'd paid for it was Martin Wainwright, the Martin Wainwright Foundation. And he said to me, we're not going to move the statue, but I can give you the maquette, which is a model of the statue. So he gave it to me, and he said to me, I know you want to do something in memory of Arthur. You don't need to move the statues to do it. So phase one, we took the maquette to Leeds City Museum, and the maquette is in the museum next to his medal.
Yeah.
I originally was trying, I think the mistake I made was, I think I wanted to move it to Roundhay because that's where he'd been brought up.
Yeah.
I think had we suggested at the time moving it to Millennium Square.
Yeah,
Right, okay. So
because it ties up, doesn't it? It seems like
somebody sent me a message,
and more people would see it. It's in the second.
So somebody sent me a message about 6 weeks ago and said, "I found your name. Should we try and move the statue again?" I thought anyway. So we had the maquette.
Yeah.
And then it was called the Bring Him Home campaign. And I was hoping that what we'd do was we'd move the statue on the back of a wagon from where it was to Roundhay Park. We'd all sing Bring Him Home like out of this maze. Didn't happen. So what happened after that was that he was my dad's best friend and Bring Him Home. So what we did, phase 3 of the story, is on Armistice Day in 2019, we put 2 glass bricks in the St Gemma's wall. One for my mum and dad and one for Arthur. Put them together. Didn't end there. So then we were approached before COVID. So they said, I think it's a good idea if we do a blue plaque.
Yeah.
So after COVID, and you've got the brochure, you can take it away with you. We basically we decided that we wanted to link St Gemma's with Arthur because it's all about heroism. You know, this was a guy of 21 who managed to land a plane with the most horrendous injuries, but he did it. And so, on his 100th birthday, which was the 5th of March 2022, we unveiled the plaque at Roundhay School. And the other thing that I've done as well, I'm a great one for donating trophies as memories. It's kind of I think I'm obsessionate about it. So. So at Roundhay School, there is the Arthur Louis Aaron Trophy, and that's given to the person, I think in the 4th or 5th form, whatever it is now, who's done the most, has contributed most to the school in terms of volunteering, etc. And it gets even better because there's an RAF cadets down at Roundhay, 208 Squadron. I've donated them a trophy they give to their top cadet. So, but for me, it's like, it felt right, you know. I finally, long way afterwards, you know, I reunited my dad and Arthur, and I'm quite proud of that. And when we've done things, we've linked it all to when we had it at Roundhay School. There was, you know, we raised money, and that money goes to St Gemma's because we think we're showing the heroism of Arthur linked to the heroism of the people with cancer and the rest of the people who were there. So that was the end of that saga. What else have I done? I'm kind of. I like a challenge. So the other thing I did was, when I was part of the Robert Sinclair Davidson Foundation, did a lot with MND, motor neuron disease. And basically, I saw a lady, she put in the paper, Yorkshire Evening Post, I'm trying to raise £250,000 to go for this treatment in America. So I contacted the Yorkshire Evening Post and said, would you ask us to talk to me? Anyway, we met in Costa. And I talked to her, and I said, okay, I said, let's be honest. I said, you're not going to raise £250,000 to go to America. I said, what is top of your bucket list? She said, I've always wanted to get married. I said, okay. So where would you like to get married? She said, a mansion. By a massive coincidence, the people who run the mansion was at my daughter's wedding the year before. So we go and meet them, and they basically said, she had an amount of money but not enough. They said, we will do the wedding at cost. Yeah. So they did it at cost. I got everything else. I got a photographer, all these people to do it for nothing. Best thing of all was, I was walking with my daughter through town and she said, let's go to Cooney. We went in Cooney. Cooney donated a week's holiday in Crete. Wow. So the wedding came and people bought into it. The stroke of genius was that I contacted Bride magazine, which doesn't exist anymore, and said, this is a great story. So I did the story before, and so all these people's name was in Bride magazine. I got her nails done. I went to the village hotel. I got a 3 nights in the hotel. I got a photographer. I got a magician.
Yeah.
It was probably my proudest moment. So I met her in February. We did the wedding, was on May the 31st, which by coincidence was my father's birthday. But the thing was, she could still speak at the wedding.
Yeah.
And she stood up and she said, when I met Stewart, I thought, what a flaky character. But she said, he's a musician. And she said, Stewart, what are you going to do after this wedding? I said, at midnight, I'm going to take all my clothes off. I'm going to walk across Roundley Park Lake naked. So the story moves on. COVID.
Did you do that?
No, I didn't.
Okay. I assumed you didn't.
No, I didn't. I'm good, but I'm not that good. And there weren't any stepping stones, so I couldn't do it. So
we don't advise that anyway.
No,
I remember all the stories when I was at school of like, someone tried to swim across the lake.
Where did you go to school?
Moortown Primary.
Where did you? I went to Moortown Primary
Yeah,
School.
well, I was there for its 100th anniversary for the.
And where did you go after that?
St Andrews, down the road, Knockout Hat. Yeah.
Yeah. So and interesting thing about Arthur is that Arthur was a Catholic, and so which is kind of good because it links with St Gemma's, and St Gemma actually, obviously was a Catholic, but she's buried in Italy. That's a place called Lucca. So, which is just part of the story. So we're at the wedding.
Yeah.
Do that. Then COVID comes.
Yeah.
So I couldn't go and see her a lot, but basically I went, although she didn't strictly qualify, the Robert Sinclair Davison Foundation, who I was still in contact with, they bought her a chair. Mm-hmm. I went to see her a couple of times outside her house, but I never actually went into the house. Anyway, she got taken into St Gemma's. She spent the last 8 weeks of her life in St Gemma's. And I went to the funeral. The only good thing was that all her friends and family, or most of them, hadn't seen, because of COVID, they'd not seen her deteriorate.
Yeah.
So the last real memory they had of her was the wedding.
Yeah, that's
so
nice.
When I went to the funeral and people came up to me and on her wedding brochure there's pictures of her at the wedding. And it's kind of, I'd never do it again. I don't know where I got the inspiration from, but it was just something I did. So you move on about a couple of years after she died, and there was just an event in St Gemma's. St Gemma's have a fantastic way of looking after children and families who've lost their parents. So they built this wooden, it's won all sorts of awards because it's eco-friendly, etc. They built this like wooden hut, so chalet, so that kids don't have to have counselling in the hospital and have it in the garden. Yeah. So I went there, and this one something said, "Are you Dr. Manning?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I looked after Ruth on the ward. She was in for 8 weeks." I said, "Really? 8 weeks?" She said, "Yeah." Wow. And she said, "The thing that you don't know is that Ruth basically, all around her wall, she had pictures of her wedding blown up." And so I'm telling you those stories because they're all part of my life.
Yeah.
And whatever I get out of what I do, I get far more back. You know, like I went yesterday, I'm quite passionate about health inequalities. And, you know, working with this charity in Leeds looks after people with HIV. I'm the first healthcare professional that they've ever engaged with on a sort. You know, so I go early. So I was there 4 hours yesterday because one of the things that we try and do, we have this Cancer Smart presentation to people, is we try and train people to give it because I can't go all over. But it was yesterday. It was, you know, I went at the beginning, I had a coffee, we had lunch together, and it's just amazing, really, the reaction you get from people. And so, you know, I do that, and I get far more out of it. So yeah, I'm getting to the stage where I'm probably at the limit of what I can do. You know, but the thing is that I do it, and if I do something, I do it properly. Yeah. And like I've said, the head of the West Yorkshire and Harrogate Cancer Alliance said to me, "How are we going to replace you when you retire?" I said, "You're not." He said, "So what are you going to do?" I said, "I've got it." I said, "Before I move on, I'm going to produce a series of videos that you can drag out every year." I said, "And at our Cancer Champions meetings, same as like, you know, the Labour Party has, we'll keep the red flag flying here. I want everybody to sing 'We Are the Champions' in memory of me." I mean, I said it jokingly, but yeah. So that's what I do in charity-wise. But it does a lot for me. And I go and give talk. There's a meeting at the Queen's Hotel next week, and there's 250 people. And I was never a great sort of public speaker, but it doesn't, and I don't have notes.
Yeah.
The only time I had notes was when I've given speeches at a wedding, because I'd rather just come over and I might make mistakes and repeat, but it's a natural way of doing it. So they tell me what they want me to say, and I can make it 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever people want.
Yeah. Do you see that as treatment? Because like that example with that lady, with Ruth, there's a level of treatment to that, because it's alleviation. It's
You're quite right. So I do it. It's a way of coping with things. But the day,
but it's also alleviating pain, making people feel happier, improving quality of life.
Sorry, I interrupted. The day that I retired, I gave up my license. So I tell the story, which isn't true, but people say, "What did you do when you retired?" So I said, "I locked the surgery door, walked down Dewsbury Road, went across the River Aire, threw my stethoscope into the River Aire like Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry, and I went to celebrate where? McDonald's." But that's not true. But I didn't want so. But what I'm saying to you is, I can still care for people and look after them. And you're quite right. Yeah. It's called making a difference. It's called making a difference in all sorts of ways. That difficult to explain, but it's I have the ability to do it, and it's making a difference. It's being a voice for people. Yeah. So it's therapeutic, if you like. And there are times when I get down a bit, but realistically, if I didn't do what I did, I think the adverse things that have happened to my life were different. But it's therapy for me, which is why COVID was so difficult, and why I need to go out and do other things. I mean, like I was there yesterday. I'm talking to you today. Next week I'm at a meeting. My daughter then comes from America. Good story this. My daughter married an American. So we went on a cruise in 2000 on the millennium, because we decided after my dad died we needed a decent holiday. So we went as a family. She met this American guy and they said, "We'll love each other forever." And I said, yeah. Holiday romance. They did, unfortunately. So he came to live here. Yeah. And then they went back there. So she got married in America in 2008. So I gave the father of the bride speech. And the Americans do not understand my sense of humour. So at the wedding, there's 100 people, 20 English people and 80 Americans. And I talked about my daughter, and I said, I'm nearly 50 now. I said, the situation is I was nearly 60. So I said, I haven't got many regrets in life. But one regret is that I didn't book to go on the cruise 2 weeks later. So all the English people laughing, "Gee, what's he talking about?" It's like the American,
"Oh my God, that's rude."
Like her next door neighbour, really nice guy. Every year we go for a bargain, he says, "Gee, Stewart, I'm definitely going to come to England. I've never been, and I want to see Liverpool play." So I said, "Okay, yeah." He said, "And do you know my great-grandmother came from Ireland?" I said, "Northern Ireland or Southern Ireland?" "Are you telling me there's two Irelands?" But Americans bring the worst out of it, because I like to sort of get involved with people. And so,
you've still got a playful edge to you, haven't you?
Yeah, so this is another instance. So I'm looking after my grandson. And so I used to go over for months, 6 weeks at a time. And so my daughter would drop me off at the mall. Great place, you can eat. He slept a lot of times at the playground, read a book. So I'm having lunch one day, and he keeps staring at this stunning blonde on the next table. And she said, "Gee," when she said, "Gee, I've got to admit you've got a great looking grandson there." I said, "He's not my grandson." "What?" I said, "I'm actually a Manning. We're male English nannies." And I said, "a lot of senators and people like that, and I can't tell you who I'm working for, like a man to look after a man." Yeah. I said, "You probably haven't heard of it, but I went to the Lady Di School of Nannying in Kensington." "Gee, I've never met a Manning. I'm going to tell my friends." I said, "Yeah." And she went on, and I can't help doing that. It's kind of, I never grew up. My father said to me, it was towards the end of his life. Yeah. And physically he was gone, but mentally he was fine. So he said to me, "You've got to promise me you'll look after your mother. And then when she's gone, enjoy the money." He said, "I have to tell you, I have one regret in life." And this is 1999 when I'm nearly 50. He says, "I have one regret in life. I won't live to see you grow up."
That's a good line.
That's me. And
was he as bad though? Was your dad?
No, he wasn't. No,
was he quite serious?
Yeah, but the thing is, it wasn't serious. He was a very interesting man. You say, where does the charity come from? It came from him. When I was younger, he basically said, you never walk past a collection tin, even if you don't like the charity, put some money in. And the other thing that he did that I think is interesting is, I'm from a Jewish background. And so when Jewish people pass away, they have a period of mourning and people come to your house and have a chat. And when my mum passed away, somebody came to me and said, I want to tell you something about your dad. I thought, oh my God, what's he done? So basically, my dad was one of the people in Leeds that if somebody Jewish died and there wasn't enough money for a burial, he contributed. So it comes from that, and it's passing on the legacy of that. He did a lot of work, he did a lot of charity work himself. And so, I just really enjoy it. But you're right, it is, I do it for me as much as I do it for the thing. And I can't imagine not doing it. My regret is that I didn't start doing it when I first retired.
So you've mentioned hardship, and, obviously you're able to keep you're upbeat, you positive outlook.
Most of the time.
Yeah. So what I want to get to is you've mentioned the difficulty, having a breakdown.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a bit, however you want to
I'll tell you
about it. Yeah.
No problem. Okay. When you can't make patients better, it's bad. When it's your own parent, you can't. And my mum had dementia, and dementia is a terrible thing.
It's awful.
It's awful. And basically, I'd lost. My mum was very proud of me because my mum was the typical Jewish mother who said, "My son, the doctor." So when we went out as a family, when we went on holiday, we used to have a sweepstake. We'd all put £1 in and guess how long it'd take us to say, "My son, the doctor." Moving on, she was really proud of me. Anyway, she started having trouble driving, so I'm waiting for her one day at home, at her house, and she's about half an hour late, and she comes up with the rear passenger door of her car missing. So I had to stop her driving. So after that, it was, my bloody son who's a doctor. So she had dementia. But the thing about my mum is that you're dealing with somebody, and I think she was a proud, smart lady, and you're talking about somebody who you go in and she'd pooed on the floor. And the breast cancer with breast cancer, it wasn't treatable, and it advanced very quickly, and she ended up in a terrible state.
And you couldn't tell her either, could you?
No, and that's the other problem, is because she had dementia,
yeah,
I had to make some decisions for her with my brother.
Yeah.
So anyway, she was at home, we were fortunate, my brother and I paid for 24-hour care at home, which was only right. She fell and broke her hip and ended up in hospital. And I'd hardly been out for 4 months. I sat in my old house in the room there. And my brother was great. He basically did all the finance and everything like that. And I used to visit my mum 2 or 3 times a week. And I'd seen her, and it's a really interesting story. So my brother used to go there, and she hadn't spoken any sense for months, years.
Yeah.
And my he used to go to see her, and he sat there, and she just said, "Michael, don't worry about me, Cyril's calling me." And that was my dad. That was the Wednesday. On the Friday, they rang me from the hospital and said, "We can't do any more for you, Dr. Manning." Went down to the hospital, held her hand, she went to sleep, my head cleared, and 2.5 weeks later I went back to work. And that's I don't know whether there's a God there or not, but that is my epiphany. It's like the same thing has happened to St. Paul on the road to Damascus. But that changed my life. And so basically, when I do things, I do it with them in mind. And I went back to work. I only worked part-time. I told you the story about the doctor who replaced me. And then I retired. But still, there are times when, I'll be honest with you, I'm on long-term medication. If you have a breakdown at age I was 60, medications, you've got a 25% chance of recurrence if you don't have medication. So there's been times like I got very down because my daughter was left with a 6-week-old baby. And then my friend passed away in America. And in February, I was sat there, it was a Sunday, and I still suffer occasionally from anxiety. I got fulminating anxiety, which meant I just couldn't do anything. So I spoke to the doctor, upped my medication, I'm back to normal. But it's something that it made me a lot wiser, because it made me understand. My family has a history of mental illness, but it made me understand what mental illness was like. And what was kind of sad was that some of my friends just stayed away from me.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, because I've always been there for
it's
everyone.
It's that whole thing, and I think English people are particularly terrible for it. It's that thing of like, oh, I don't know what to say, and I don't know how to do it, and I don't be a person.
But it's how you talk to people.
Yeah.
And it's like if you go back to my friend, the one who set up the Robert Sinclair Davison Foundation, I didn't ring him to talk to him while his son was terminally ill. Reason being is, what am I going to say? There's nothing to say.
Yeah.
I sent him a message and said everything, and then after he passed away, I went to see him and we had a chat. But it's people still run away from mental illness. It's still a stigma to some.
But they run away from physical illness as well.
Yeah. So this is what we talk about, and it's talking about people. So that affected my life. I hadn't suffered from anxiety before that, but certain things set it off, and then I can cope with it.
But that's so much to deal with in such a short space of time as well. It's like, that's a lot, isn't it? It's like you're just being barraged with grief and pain and...
Yeah, so so it was bad. I mean, it was, I'm conscious things that when I start to feel anxious again, I have to take some action, because there's no way I'm ever going to go back to where I was. Yeah. And it's not depression, and it's just what I think is, and interestingly, one of the things I did with Macmillan was I helped them set up a course which is about helping people after cancer treatment and the rest of it. And I've always basically thought mindfulness was a load of rubbish. But interesting, it's what I do when I sit in a chair and think about people. But the person there who was actually a psychologist said, and I told her about myself, she said, you are the classic person who suffers from boom and bust. So you put everything into what you're doing. She said, but after a period of time, periodically, you just bust and it leaves you in that. So I'm more mindful of that. But it's a family thing, and I think it's difficult for us as a family because my daughter lives in America. She feels guilty because she's not here. My two daughters are very different. My eldest daughter is like me. When she was 8 years old, I went to school, and the teacher said, your daughter's got a very strange sense of humour for 8-year-old. What do you do? I'm a doctor. That explains it. Whereas my other daughter thinks I'm immortal. I can't talk to my other daughter about what will happen in the future, etc. She thinks that, but we're a very close family. I was close to my own family, which goes back to when you asked me. That's why I came back to Leeds. I wanted to be with my mum and dad and all my friends. The thing that's difficult for me now is that 3 of my 4 friends are no longer with us. I've got so when I've decided for my 75th birthday party, I'm only having people I want at it, which is great. So I've got one of my old friends is coming, and but most of the people I've met recently, the people who mean something to me. Yeah. And so I've got my speech ready. So I'm starting off with saying, some of you wonder why you're here today. And some of you, where are the rest of the people? Well, to be honest, you are the A team. All the B team have got save the dates for next week at McDonald's. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. So I want to, because you said you wanted to talk about Brexit. So we'll do Brexit.
Yeah, fine. No, I ramble in what I say, but it's much better for you to go backwards and forwards. And then, because I'll explain to you why about Brexit, and I think you'll understand it. And it also links in with Arthur.
Okay.
If you stay long enough, you get dinner. But I just love talking, and I like to make people laugh. Yeah. And the thing is, I like, in my own way, part of when you're not here anymore, you want people to remember you. And I know that in 30 years' time, I think, I remember that crackpot doctor. I've made you laugh a lot.
Well, that's good. That's the enjoyable part of this.
So in 2 years' time, I can contact you and we'll work. You help me write my autobiography, and then we'll do Stewart Manning, the musical.
Well, I can do that. I've got theatre background. So the question's normally, has it changed your work at all since we have Brexited? But yeah, feel free to move that around to suit the framing you need.
Yeah. Brexit hasn't altered. I mean, I don't work anymore. I've seen the effects of Brexit, and I voted to remain. And the reason I voted to remain goes back to when I was at medical school. Okay, so when we were at medical school, we went on a rugby tour with Normandy. And 2 consultants took us to make sure we didn't misbehave. And so we went out, we drink a lot and the rest of it. So one afternoon, the 2 consultants said, "We're going out for a trip this afternoon, lads." I thought we were going to a vineyards or whatever. So we went to a First World War cemetery. And we got off the bus and they said, "I want you to form a circle around the cenotaph," which we did. And they said, "As far as you can see here are young men of your age who gave their lives so that you could womanize and drink and the rest of it." And I never forgot that. So for me, Brexit was, I just felt it gave us some security because we'd gone the longest time without fighting any wars in Europe.
Yeah.
And also I don't know, I think they weren't honest about it. I think it was a kind of an emotional thing, but people didn't really understand it. And people like Boris told the most awful lies, like we're going to give £350 million a year. And I think in the long term, I don't think it's done us a lot of good. It hasn't changed my life particularly, but basically I think it's altered a lot of things, like the very short of people to work in restaurants and things here. Most of it, people have gone home, and it's just different sorts of ways. Like the government saying, we're going to build 1.5 million homes. Who's going to do it? So a lot of the people have. So, but Brexit for me is I felt more secure being part of a bigger organisation, and I think it's a shame, and I don't really. It was a lot of wrangling. It went on a lot of times. It caused a lot of problems, and I think that in terms of changing. So about changing medicine, one thing that Brexit has probably done is it's probably got rid, not so much medicine, but in social care. It's stopped a lot of the people who came here to work doing the poorly paid jobs in social care. So there's a shortage of people to work in homes, there's a shortage of people to work also in hospitals. And also, we import doctors. We do import doctors. I know about that because I was on a when I got bored during COVID, I did things, joined groups online. And this was a group looking at recruitment and retention. And basically, we have a shortage of doctors here, which we fill in with people from abroad. Now, my suggestion, I would say that anybody who qualifies in the NHS, doctors, dentists, physios, whatever, if they're prepared to give a period of time to the NHS, we should write off their student tuition.
Well, this is it. You should have to do like you do 3, 4, 5 years, whatever minimum, and then fine, off you go, wherever you want to go.
And friends of mine at medical school did that. Friends of mine at medical school basically signed up for the forces and they got paid. So I would do that. To me, and in terms of money, we pay £150,000, I think, to get somebody to come from Romania. And one of the lads from medical school, his daughter is an A&E consultant in Australia, and 10 of the 12 consultants in this hospital are English. It has actually a more severe effect in that Bradford has the lowest amount of dentists per head of population in the UK, but the highest incidence of mouth cancer. So these things, in what way Brexit has indirectly affected that, and it makes it more difficult for people to work at. We've got there's a European shortage of doctors who work in cancer. So it has
also the research as well. Like you've changed that research, like the ability to do research at that level and easily access all that information. Sure, you can exchange data, like frictionlessly-ish, across borders and so on. But I think in terms of funding and stuff, it probably makes it a bit more awkward because that was one of the things they talked about early on in Brexit, of like, this is really going to damage our ability to research and the research community. So, that's one of the things that I heard about, so I don't know.
I don't know how it's gone. I think they've probably got around that to some extent. But to me, it was just, having spent, having gone to a lot of the countries in Europe and the rest of it, and not long, I've been to places, like, you walk around places like Prague or Budapest and...
Yeah, they're rebuilt.
It's like you talk about Brexit. We haven't got enough people, because of the people who've gone, to build these railways and things like that. It's like HS2. They've now put it back another...
And it's also the training. It's like, the skills shortage. We have these skills. Train. Put some money into some training. Like, all of the, just fund more education places and more training, or like tell people that you want them in these things. You know, like they just don't even try.
But it's where it goes. That's why I train people to give my talk.
Yeah.
And it's different training for different people. But I just think, you know, you go to, my brother went to Japan. They've had the bullet train for sorts of years. I went
40 years away.
Yeah, when I went on that famous cruise in 2000 where my daughter met her husband, we actually stopped in a place called Warnemünde, which used to be East Germany. The trains are unbelievable. You get on the train, it says, it's always on time.
Yeah.
It warns you, it says, in about 5 languages, train at the next station if you want to go by trains. And then you just think, and the problem is that we haven't got enough people to work. And it's, in terms of, I mean, you go back to COVID and Brexit, you know, there are a lot of people who can't work now or don't work now. And I think from my point of view, and I did in my career as a doctor, as well as working for Leeds United, I did lots of, I did industrial medicine, so I looked after Leeds City Council, I looked after Lewis's, which was a department store, looked after Burton's and different things like that. And in that, if somebody's been off work, there comes like a critical, you know, if you've been off work for say 2 years, the odds on you going back to work, I mean, and what are we going to train people to do? I mean, what are we going to train people to do? I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I just think, I get annoyed with things like, you know, like for me personally, we're talking about, I don't know why I ever got the winter heating allowance. I used to give mine to St. Gemma's. So if they just said, we're cutting yours and we're going to give double to the people who need it, but it just, I don't understand it. I think they're going to have real problems when they look at cutting some of these disability benefits. And I think, I don't know how to change things, and I don't know, but we have to retrain people. And also we have to, a lot of people go to university now, don't they? And they come out with a degree that doesn't offer them any possibility of doing anything.
Well, and the other thing as well is that there are no, you know, I see this article a lot. There are no entry-level jobs now because most of the jobs are asking, like they're asking for experience or they're asking for qualifications for, like, you know, serving coffee and stuff. And it's like, who has this experience or or how do they get the experience of, like, especially if they're new starters, these are supposed to be entry-level jobs. They're supposed to be jobs anyone can do. You get some basic training and some work experience and then you sort of build from there. Yeah, I think there's all sorts of problems.
But we have to go back, it goes back to school. I was
going to say, like, the employers want people work ready, but it's like schools don't know how to deliver work ready.
But they haven't for forever.
No, forever, and because you kind of can't.
I went to Roundhay Grammar School. I passed my 11 plus. The problem with Roundhay was it was a great school if you're academic like me, but it had a lot of people who weren't academic, and the same with what was secondary Monza. There's no point in studying Latin, really, things like that. So at schools, I always felt, and they did for a while, they teach people things like bricklaying, car mechanics, which doesn't really matter, but train people for the job, because then you get a lot of people with degrees coming out and things like that, and the work has changed dramatically. There are aren't there many whole tiers of jobs that have gone. Get some experience, get some work experience, you know, like go and work for a month in Costa. Do these sort of things, you know, instead of going on school trips to Hadrian's Wall. I don't know the answers. It sounds a bit cynical. Yeah. But you have to look at what workforce needs. Like when I did the work on the NHS workforce, we have a great problem because over 50% of the working workforce are female. I'm biased because I have 2 daughters, but we haven't really thought, you know, women are mothers before they're doctors or whatever. How are we going to get around that? And so one of my suggestions was, when I did this workforce thing, was as well as let's look at how we can get women back into the workforce. So we have to basically have the jobs, you know, and hours to suit them. Now, you have to have A&E consultants 24 hours a day. Let's have a scheme, short of doctors in, well, they say in general practice, let's have a scheme where we have jobs for women where they can work between 9:30 and 2:30, then get the children. Interestingly, I went to look around the new lab at St. James's, which is in histopathology. When I qualified, it was one man and his microscope. Now, we went round there, and the consultant, again, he said, anyone know what histopathology is? Hand up. Are you retired? He said, are you a doctor? Yeah. He said, when did you qualify? 1973. He said, my God, what was it like then? I said, tough. We just about stopped using leeches and only half the patients got chloroform as an anaesthetic. But
they don't have the reference now. They don't know what the history was. So they can't see it's a joke.
So he said two exciting things from that. One guy there had got his PhD. What he did was he adapted the find your phone app to find your specimen app. So every specimen that comes into the lab has a like a barcode on it. And as we're walking around, he said, and he'd hidden one in a coat and the rest of it. But the point that I'm getting to a long way around is, I was talking to him about, I said, how do you get on with workforce? He said, we train mainly women. These women hardly ever come in here because they can look at histology specimens anytime they like. So you can look at a breast cancer slide 3 a.m. or whatever. So we have to try and gear the workforce to what we want to do. And that's why there's an awful lot of disillusioned females who won't do the job or who take easy jobs because they just can't do it within their...
It's not designed for them, is it? It's that thing of like, I read there was a really good sort of description the other day, and I can't remember the whole thing, but they were basically like, being a woman is kind of like being a bicycle in a world designed for cars, and a whole explanation of like, it's not designed for you, it's really dangerous, and nobody pays attention to you.
I think it's a serious point when you work for... I mean, when I was at medical school, there was perhaps the ratio was 6-1 at medical school, men to women. But it's completely changed. But you're losing all this experience. And it goes back to what I said a long time ago, is that you have to try and gear the jobs to the workforce. And there's no reason why. We've got huge backlogs of people waiting for scans and things like that. Half the problem is we have really out-of-date equipment. But let's do more. Let's open some more sessions up at weekends. So some of these women radiologists can come in and work at a weekend. So the best thing about it was that I'm fairly vocal, as you know. So we've had all these Zoom meetings, etc. And they decided in the end that they would have COVID would have a face-to-face meeting to discuss all the top. So we have this face-to-face meeting to sort of, and I'm having lunch on the same table as a professor. And he said, "You've got a lot to say, Stewart." He said, "And I don't think you really think that I have a handle on general practice, even though I'm professor." I said, he said, most Mondays I go in for 2 hours. And I thought, oh my God. So you talk about to Brexit or whatever. I think the thing is we won't really know the true detrimental effects of it until we get through at the moment, we've got problems because we've got the EU, that they're not, we want to remember, but they haven't got a whole policy on what they want to do about Iran, what they want to do about Gaza, what they want to do about Ukraine. But it's just, I don't know, I felt I was British, but I enjoy being part of Europe. And I think not in my lifetime, but it might go full circle again. There's all these sorts of, and it was done on a racist basis, wasn't it? Let's get rid of the migrants. In my view, the problem was that a lot of people played on it, and what they forget is that a lot of the migrants who came here did all the jobs that we don't want to do.
Well, the other thing with that is, again, it's a media narrative, and it's the way that London has chosen to tell that story. The story they don't tell is all of the deprivation that's, it's through, Blair and on and on. And it's like those areas that have been dying, there's entire towns in the country that are just dead now. Like all their shops are closed, like it's gone. And then it's more and more all over the place. You never hear that story.
The story you don't hear as well is that a lot of the people that voted for Brexit lived in places like rural Cambridgeshire. But where all the peas and the things were picked were people who come here to work. And the ordinary English person will not stand in the field picking or working cold conditions in the Findus factory. And I think I think you realise what has changed even before. It's got worse since Brexit. But I went to a place called Barnard Castle up in the northeast.
Famously where Dominic Cummings went.
Dominic Cummings, Yeah, okay.
We'll leave that.
We'll leave that. We can't be political. But everywhere you go in these places, and it's partly because there's no steel industry anymore. There's no. But every other shop is either a charity shop, a betting shop, or a takeaway. No, I love Dominic Cummings. I think the thing is that I say is, you have one chance when you do something wrong to be honest.
Yeah. So I do want to. I want to talk about UBI, but I want to talk to you about social media because I just want to get your take on it. Obviously, I mean, you're used to being in person, going to events, doing things, doing the footwork, doing things in the real world. Do you bother with social media much? Do you find benefit from it? Is it useful to you?
It is useful. Yeah, I basically I've been more restrained on social media since I became chairman of the charity.
Yes.
Do I find it useful? Yes, I do, because things like Facebook, to some extent, and it depends on the sort of audience you're looking at. Yeah. Young people don't like Facebook as much, but we get a lot of hits on Facebook for our cancer charity.
Yeah.
I do Facebook, I do LinkedIn. I've started to try with Instagram, but there's just a difference. I find it interesting. And also, from the work that I do, it's not so much so I constantly post about things I do. So I do a lot for St. Gemma's.
Yeah.
So I'll go out. So last week, I was the guy who you might have seen. If you look near Marks and Spencer at Moortown Corner, there's these banners for the Sunset Walk. That was me. So I'll post I'll take a picture of it and say, and it's kind of all like, when I give leaflets, I go out and give leaflets for different things. And that's amazing to me. Walking around for 2 or 3 hours talking to people, giving leaflets. And I like Chapel Alton particularly because I can go in Starbucks and get a coffee. But, or I go down to Chapel Allerton and I go down to Oakwood. There's a lady at Oakwood who runs something called Woof, which is like a dog thing. And so when I went in there, I had her holding the leaflets and said, I don't know why I've come in here. I'm not a dog lover. So it's things like that. And I publicise what I do. Not so much for me, but so people, so it's, I do different things. And so the St. Gemma's things, and I LinkedIn, and in terms of social media, we have made great progress in the last 2 years because our charity appointed somebody to deal with the social media. And so, we haven't got anybody who's an expert on it, but it's made a massive difference.
Yeah.
And we have and it's also publicising things and I like Facebook. LinkedIn is through LinkedIn. You got in touch with me.
Yeah.
One of the things I support is the Leeds Community Foundation.
Yeah, they're great.
And the reason I support them is that my friend who died of pancreatic cancer was one of the original supporters, and he was a trustee of the fire station at Oakwood.
All right.
So my way, apart from getting someone to run the marathon, my way of working his memories, I'm a supporter. They do fantastic work, and I through them and things like that. So through Leeds Community Foundation, somebody approached me and said, we offer a service. We offer a pro bono service where we will look at your website and things like that. I think that it's difficult because in some ways it may go too far and it's not really policed properly. I mean, I'm appalled by, the bullying that goes on and the rest of it. But part of that has to be up to the parents monitoring what the children do. And I again don't know the answer, but it has a lot of benefits and it allows you to keep in touch. Instagram, I'm only just starting to use it, and I find Facebook easy. Yeah. And it's things like, I've often posted things on Facebook that aren't true.
So it's you that's doing all the misinformation.
All this stuff. You know how I tease people?
Yeah.
So the Yorkshire Evening Post, this is about 2 years ago, one of their reporters puts, we're looking for interesting stories about people who have famous Yorkshire relatives. So I just said, I thought you might be interested. My wife is a descendant of Mother Shipton. Ignored it. So then after 2 weeks, she said, I'm really interested in this story. She chased me for about a month. And I tell, it's just, or like when I was, I'll try to be stiff, but when I was in America, we went shopping, and we went in this, and this girl said, gee, are you Australian? I said, yeah, I've still got a bit of the accent because I worked there. Gee, what did you do there? So I was actually I was actually had a small part in Neighbours. So you talk about social media is good for publicising things. So if you want people to attend one of your...
When I left Australia, I did the working visa for just did a year. We didn't do the 2. And when I was leaving on the immigration form, they asked, put your occupation. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be back here. I was just being stupid. So I put dancer. And as we were leaving, the immigration lady, oh, you're a dancer? Has a whole conversation with me. And I'm just having to bullshit.
So I mean, when I was younger, when I used to go into town and talk, I never told girls that I was a doctor. I used to say I'm a landscape gardener. And I said, yesterday I've just come back from a big job in Saudi Arabia where we turned the desert into the equivalent of cucumbers. I love the Americans.
That's a real job now.
Yeah, so if you think back, Starbucks always had Wi-Fi before everybody else did. So I'm in the airport and I went so I'm talking to my wife on FaceTime or whatever, and I said, the flight's on time. So this guy said, gee, I can't help but hear your English. And I thought, oh. He said, I just want to talk to you. He said, I'd love to go to England, but there's all the terrorists and people. I think, oh my God, gun crime. He said, I want to go there. He said, I've got a great aunt in Milton Keynes. Is that okay? I said, It's about as far north as you can go before the Scots come over the border. And he's like, So social media is something that I think, not necessarily for individuals, but for businesses and charities, I think it's essential.
I want to build on the stuff that you were saying there. I think one of the things that you've not mentioned that I think is important and is underplayed of being an example, being the change you want to see in the world or however you want to put it. But it's as much about being an example, I am doing this. You can do this too. Other people can do this. I'm not special to do this, but, this is what I'm doing. It's something that you might want to try.
And that's why you've hit the nail on the head, because that's what I do for St. Gemma's. So when I went and promoted the Sunset Walk or whatever it was, and then I say to people, I'll be at the Sunset Walk. Would you like to help? But when they're actually trying to recruit, I do that. And it is doing that. It's letting people... I say to people, some people have got no concept of the real world. Whereas, I worked in a deprived area.
You've seen what it's like.
Seen what it's like. I went to Seacroft before COVID, and I can't remember why I went there, but they've got a clothes exchange there. There's people, and I'm thinking, but it's. I think that when you're retired, and it's not about giving charities money, it's giving us time. Yeah. One of my very good friends gives up a day a week to go and do reading in a school. Another one of my friends drives takes residents from one of the homes out for the day. And it's sort of showing to people, and I think it's important. I think my generation does a lot more of it. I think that my parents did a lot of travelling, but my grandparents, if you look at them, I look at the pictures, they're about 60, they look about 100 because they didn't do anything. Yeah. I've got a great picture of my grandparents sat on the beach at Scarborough with shirt and tie and the rest. So it's changed. So I think it is, social media I don't ever comment politically on it. So we've persuaded our practice to have a Facebook page. And what really annoyed me was some of the people who were joining in weren't even patients of that surgery. And I think that can be dangerous. And I think that used properly, or our events and things like that, or where we're going to be, and we tell people what we've done. Yeah. I think that works quite well. I think LinkedIn has given me quite a lot of contacts on the use of it. And that's a more restrained sort of social media, sort of respectful, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. But, and as I said, it enables me to post things like I'm trying to raise money for charity or whatever it is. And I let people know what I do. But it's will you help? Yeah. My brother, he was a pharmacist in Leeds. He worked 7 days a week, whatever. So since his retirement, he goes all over the world, and I don't blame him. But it was his idea back in the day for this fund at St. Gemma's. And he should be really proud of that. In terms of social media, it can enable you to connect. You can have your friends and family, and it's or like you can put. I sometimes repost things that have happened And show that. And you can celebrate, like my daughter's put on, she's finished school in America. It can be abused, but I don't think we can ever go back to where there isn't social media. I don't think we can ever do that.
Well, you can't put the cat back in the bag, can you?
No, but I think it has to be policed better.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we kind of messed it right up by not making it a over 18s only sort of environment.
Yeah, but I've seen some of these things of bullying and things like that. And what is actually quite interesting when you look at crime and things like that is that a lot of these young people who commit crimes have posted about it on social media before, and in terms of bullying and things like that. So it can be used for the good. I think that organisations like St Gemma's and other charities, they have things on LinkedIn, and it enables people to engage with corporate people to do things, and that's quite a good way. So a lot of businesses let you have 2 days, whatever it is a year. So they will post Leeds Building Society gave a day up at the gardens, and I think that's important. It needs to be policed. How you do it, I don't really know. But I think it's just the way forward.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about UBI. Are you familiar with Universal Basic Income? Have you come across this before?
Yeah. I don't know a lot about it, but I've heard it.
So normally the question is, how might that affect your work in terms of, for a lot of people, that I interview, they're startups or whatever, or they're trying a business and they're kind of like, yeah, that would be useful to give me a bit of freedom and take some of the pressure off in these circumstances. Obviously, we're still at the point where doctors hopefully are getting paid a decent wage. Yeah. So it shouldn't be a major issue in terms of, the salary and so on. But in terms of patients and in terms of possible wellness benefits and health inequality outcomes, do you think it could make an impact?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I do. I mean, I haven't given it a great deal of thought to mention it. I just think that lots of the work I do, ill health is linked to poverty. Yeah. And that's why when you look at people like the Leeds Community Foundation, they've done some amazing things. I'm quite happy to help if it's something specific, and I think that most people, if they knew their money was going to something specific, would be quite... In fact, if you go back to the days of national insurance, that was taken from people to pay for the health service. Yeah. But interestingly, when you look at basically where all the health inequalities are, it's in areas of poverty. And it's difficult to know why, but if you look at something like cancer, there's a lot of evidence that being overweight, not having exercise, poor diet, contribute to that.
But they're all linked.
Correct.
Because if you've got a poor diet, you're eating too much like fructose syrup, for example, that makes you lethargic and less interested in exercising, makes you put weight on.
Correct.
And because you're not moving as much, you're putting more weight on.
But now, in the last 5 years, it's been shown that processed foods can contribute to cancer. So it's health inequalities. So I think that it's all linked to it. It's all linked to it. And I think the problem that we've had is that the world has changed in the UK from the days when I qualified to where it is now, is that we have a lot of ethnic minorities who do very badly. We have a lot of people who don't engage with health services. The Roma community don't engage with health services. In my own small way, by me going to engage with the charity that looks after age, I came out of there yesterday really buzzing because they engaged with me, they talked to me, and they said, when are you coming back, Dr. Manning, for some more training? And I can't make a big difference, but it's a slight difference. And I think...
It goes back to that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it goes back to inequalities. And it goes back to food inequality. And it goes back to a story that was told by somebody at Leeds Community Foundation. Really he's somebody who set up... He basically... He went out, particularly during COVID, and took food and did food demonstrations. And he said, I went to this group and I taught them about basic cooking and the rest of it. And I gave them all a tube of spaghetti. And one woman put her hand up and said, I can't read the instructions on it. So things like that. It's very, very complicated. It's difficult to undo it. It's like we're going to have a group of people who have suffered because of COVID, so their qualifications are going to suffer. The question when you talk about basic income is what funds it? And that is, it's like a lot of these things. What is going to fund it? So are you going to have a wealth tax? I'm not sure that works because a lot of really wealthy people just go abroad and find. But you know, when there are people who earn a lot of money, and perhaps if you earn over £500,000 a year, your tax rate goes up. But it's really, to generate the money is very, very difficult. So how do you do it? So councils have priorities, don't they?
Yeah.
Leeds has decided cycle routes. That's their priority, rightly or wrongly.
And trees.
And trees. Don't talk to me about trees. All these trees here have got preservation orders on them. So interestingly, when they put the plans in for this place originally, they were going to turn, not that they were going to have parking externally, which would have meant getting rid of the garden. Council wouldn't let them do it. So that's why we've got an underground car park, which is great.
Better.
But it's they have things now. Whether we should have spent millions on cycle lanes, and I regularly go on the new road between the new ring road, which is great. I don't think I've seen more than one person cycling.
Yeah, but they are getting busier, and it's the sort of, if you build it, they will come. Yeah, it needs to get busy. It needs to be more connected up. So I lived in Amsterdam for 2 years. Yeah, cycling, easy to get about, was great. Obviously, very flat. Leeds is not flat. So it's a different thing cycling around Leeds. But the other place that I went to Berlin as well. We cycled in Berlin, and Berlin, amazing, better than Amsterdam for the cycle lanes and stuff. Like even at roundabouts, like just amazing cycle infrastructure. And I think if it's done right, people will use it massively. And I think the barrel bikes are a good thing. I think they're too expensive. They should
they're
be
not a
way
barrel
cheaper.
Burton.
Don't know, mate. Is that
It just occurred to me. I've never heard of barrel bikes, but there's a famous Yorkshire cyclist called Barrel Burton. So you've learned something today.
Yeah. I'll double check that it is that, but that makes a lot of sense.
I think so. I'm not. That's a serious comment.
No. I think
agree
you're right.
But councils have to decide. It's not for me to comment what they're spending money on, but it's like priorities.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that with the biggest city in Europe without a separate transport system, perhaps we'll get one. I don't know. But the thing is, these things take years to come. We've been talking. I remember that when the trams were here, and I remember the days the trams stopped, and we're now going full circle. You go to Manchester, for instance, and you get off the train.
Night buses. Do you remember night buses? Yeah, they were good, weren't they? Bring them back. Why have we not got night buses? You go to Manchester, there's an entire interchange to get people back home all night.
So if you go back a lot of years, probably nearly 40 years, I worked for Yorkshire Rider and they had they had minibuses. It was great because we did all the medicals, enabled me to go on holiday. But their minibuses have gone now. And it's like everything that we do not think far enough ahead. This country has known that there was the baby boom in 1948. In fact, it's affected me because when I went to Moortown County Primary School, one of the years I had to go to Highfield because in 1 year there was 2 intakes because there was a massive. So we've known that was going to come for how many years? Done nothing about it. We're putting housing in, and I agree. You go along. We're putting housing in, and the rest of it. But where's the infrastructure? Where's the schools?
But it's like when they do all those. We're just turning into ranting now. When they do all those, like the inner city builds and stuff. It's like, do they get shops? Do they get doctors? Do they get like? Where's the fire service? Like, where's the rest? Like you said, where's the infrastructure for them? And it's like, it's not just giving someone somewhere to live. A city isn't just a load of abodes, is it?
So when I was practicing, some of the people who lived just over the river registered with us, and then they put. But you don't think about that. So it does. It's an ideal, but it's a matter of where does the money come from, and I don't know that. It's like a lot of these things. Ideally. You would like to change the world, which I'd like to do, but you have to. It's small steps, and you have to do things. But it's a matter of actually, instead of the government's deciding what it wants to do for people, go out and ask the people what they want, which is a different.
Which you think it would be quite simple and straightforward, but they don't have the sense to be able to do it because they're not trained to think like that.
So the other arm of my charity, so we go out and give talks. We actually have a patient panel. So we take the patient panel to different groups and ask them A, what they like about the health service, B, what they don't like about the health service, and feed it back. And we've had some amazing. It's taken us a long time to about COVID. it took 2 or 3 years after COVID to get all these things going again. But we actually, we tried to set up one of these panels with the Roma community. I'm going back to the HIV and Hep B charity, and we're doing one of those in September. So actually asking people what they want. And it's different people want different things. In terms of poverty, you think about it, a lot of people in poverty and fuel poverty, you're terminally ill at home with cancer, you can't afford the heating. And that's why I agree you need a statutory minimum wage, but I don't know how you fund it. I'm just aware that sometimes some of these governments take on really ridiculous steps. I mean, I personally, if you look at my daughter's had private education, whether I think it's a good thing or not, I'm not sure. But I don't think that by getting rid of VAT on private schools, they've achieved a lot, because there's about 30,000 kids more gone into it. And also I heard a guy on the radio, this was at the time, saying and he was having a real go and saying, I'm not privileged. He said, my son at 10 years old I was told he was a maths genius, and for him to advance he needed to go to a private school. He said, and I haven't had a holiday for 7 years or changed my car. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but sometimes governments do things without any real rationale, without thinking of it. And I'm not sure that the benefits they're going to get from that outweigh the problems they're causing. It's only my view. I mean, I don't know.
No, but that's the thing. That's the point of the question. The reason I ask it, so I wanted a question to talk about money, but I didn't want to ask it because it's impolite to ask people how much they earn and so on, and we're funny about all of this. But in an ideal world, that would have been exactly what I would be like. How much you paid? I'd be like, what's your job title? How much you paid? And that kind of thing. But you don't want to have those conversations, especially if you're publishing it and it's complicated.
I mean, all I would say to you,
but it's a question about how you think of the money. And so but it's also another way to talk about that initiative, because people don't talk about it enough.
I'll talk about money without giving you a figure. I'm financially well off.
Yeah.
But I like I said to you, I always gave my winter fuel allowance to St. Gemma's. And I like to, the only way I can, and perhaps...
I mean, would that be, if it came in, would that be basically what you did with it? Would it'd either go straight into a charity, or it would, I don't know, maybe go into a savings fund for grandchildren or something like that?
No, I tend to support small charities. So I use the money that I have to support things where I can. And small things that may sound... I've always given all my old clothes to St. Gemma's charity shops. I don't anymore. I take them... There's a place over in Leeds 9 that looks after asylum seekers. I take it there. I take no money from my charity. But when I go to places and give a talk, I give them a donation. So it's not a fortune, but it's trying to help. Or like when we go to when we have these meetings, we provide the food and the rest of it. So the charities don't. I can't answer your question properly because I've never really thought about it. And I think it's like anything. I think most people are happy to support things. I support a lot of small charities and things like that. So, I've given a donation to places I've been to work recently, give the talk. It's not a lot, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but it's more than they had before.
And the other thing I can do is I have a lot of contacts. Contacts. So, typical example was I basically have gone to the 208 Squadron in Roundhay every year and given them the Arthur Louis Aaron Trophy. But the guy said to me, who was there, he said, Stewart, we're trying to raise £20,000 for a minibus. Now the thing about them is that they do fantastic work, because these cadets come from really poor backgrounds, and twice a week they go there instead of hanging around the streets. So basically I said, okay, so I put them in touch with a charity, and the charity gave them, they'd raised 10 of the 20, and this charity I put in touch with gave them the balance. And so that's the sort of thing that you can do, is talk to people. But, most small things, the only way I can do it is to support things directly. And that's how I do it. As for the long-term finances of a living minimum wage, I don't really know enough about it. But I'd really want to know who's going to pay for it. That's the issue. And then the answer is, how many people are you targeting?
Well, my stock answer of because we don't need to think about paying for it. And it's not realistically on the table as a policy option. But my stock answer for the sort of who pays for it is there's always money for war.
I wouldn't disagree with you.
So we can find the money when we want to have a war.
Well, look how much money we found to fund furlough.
Well, this is it. Yeah. It's amazing when you print your own currency where...
Yeah, unless you're like George, what's his name? Unless you sell off all your gold assets and things like that. I don't understand it to that extent.
Yeah.
I just wish politicians would be honest. And I think it's difficult. I don't like any of them, to be honest. The only one that I vaguely like is the Liberal Democrat leader, who I just like what he does, jumps out of airplanes. I just think he has a lot. Boris, I dislike. Dominic Cummings, I don't know. There's something about him. I was told by somebody, and it may not be true, that Dominic Cummings has a son who has ADHD. So if he'd have said, I've got to leave London because of that, and I'm sorry I went in the park, but my son's causing problems, he said, okay. Well, it's like when they're denied having parties and the rest of it. I would have said, look, lads, I'm spending 20 hours a day working here, and at the end of the evening we have a drink together, get over it. And he said, okay, but don't lie about it.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to ask a final question.
Okay, what's the last question?
So the last question is traditionally the change question, which is like if you could change any 3 things about your work. So we'll go a slightly different framing for this, but obviously you can mention anything. So you can be really fantastic or you can be very pragmatic about this. And you can either go, maybe look at your past experience and work experience of changes there. But if there were any 3 changes that you could make around your work, like sort of top 3 things, what might they be?
In terms of work, or whatever it was, I would look more at the NHS as a whole. And I would like to think that more people could, from a poorer background, get into medicine and things like that. I mean, the government talks about levelling up, which is why I talked to you about, some people come out of medical school with debts of £100,000. So I would like there to be some levelling up to enable, it goes back to my father.
You're from a working class background.
My father had a
medicine.
shop. My father had a shop. I got a grant, but my mum and dad, my dad went out and did insurance valuations on an evening with my mum, so that I had extra money at medical school. But we're losing out on a lot of intelligent people, and if you want the health service to prosper, you have to have people from different backgrounds. And it's like, so I would like it to be easier for people, not necessarily in medicine, but people to advance themselves. If you look at where people cover, like if you look at the Jewish community over a period of time, they came as refugees, they worked up, they become doctors, then so it gives people a way of advancing in the same way as I think a lot of the Asian communities and things have done that. So it's giving people the opportunity to actually get involved in the health services, but give them the opportunity, and not necessarily just that, give them the opportunity and backing to do other things, and make it goes right back to what we said at the beginning about let's look at let's try and target people's education. I know you have to have a general education, but try and target as people go along more to the skills that they need. You know what I mean? So that we're actually training and not everybody is going to get great grades and the rest of it, but everybody should have a chance of doing a reasonable job. And I know people who've gone right through industries and advanced themselves. So that's one thing I would do about medicine. Second thing is kind of more difficult. I think that I would like, and it's not going to happen probably, I would like medicine to just go back a few steps to where it was when I was working. I think we've lost a lot of that personal contact. So we've got lots of people who find it difficult to see doctors, but the relationship I had with patients is priceless. And it's something that
you don't have that now, yeah?
No. So a couple of examples of that is that I was walking through York last year, with my daughter, and there's a lady on a flower stall in York. She said, "Dr. Manning, how are you?" She said, "I was the lady who sat with you while you had your breakdown." Yeah, thanks, I love you too. But no, and also it comes back in other ways. I'm very close to the doctor who replaced me. You know, I've babysat her children. We just clicked. And whenever she meets me, in fact, I'm seeing her next week, she always tells me that people are still asking about me. And it happened 3 weeks ago was Mental Health Week, I think it was. So I have a stall in Leeds Market, which I love. It's great. And this lady comes up to me and she said, Dr. Manning, I haven't seen you since you retired. Puts her arms around me. She said, wow. She said, I remember you, and my mother always talks about it. And this family looked after me. So because I was Jewish, they always brought me vegetarian food in. Every Friday, vegetarian food. An hour later, because she now runs a charity, and her charity feeds impoverished people from the Asian community in Beeston. An hour later, some food comes in for me. And so it's that relationship. I basically, it goes back to, you know, it's back to doing something that you think is worthwhile. And it's the finest relationship you can have is with people. I mean, I've got all sorts of funny stories. I mean, the last 6 months of my career were great because all I did was no paperwork, no meeting. I just sat there talking to people. People came in and had a chat. You know, can you imagine leaving me 6 months there? That's what I did.
Yeah.
Anyway, and people came and said goodbye. People came back and talked to me. And as I said before, the thing that patients always remember is how you looked after their terminally ill or patients with cancer. I took a pride in that. I would like doctors to go back to where we had to do a cancer care review every year. A lot of doctors, some of the people I come across, have been diagnosed with cancer and have never actually spoken to their doctor about it. So let's go back to where there's more communication. A lot of it is not the doctor's fault. There has to.
I was going to say a lot of doctors would want that as well.
Want that, and you know, Crown Point. So 2 years ago, I'm in Crown Point, and we're in Smith's there getting toys and the rest of it. And I'm going up the escalator, and this guy at the top looks at me and goes white. Old patient said, Dr. Manning, it's you. I said, yeah. He said, the rumour went round that after you retired, you emigrated to Australia and died in the outback. So I said, you've got two choices. I said, it's either me or you need to go outside and see the three wise men and a horse going across out. I tell you these stories because...
People are mad though, aren't they?
Yeah.
That whole thing of like, who came up with that? And then it went round.
Yeah, but the thing about that is that I had I don't know anybody who had a better career than I did. And it's not, when I say why, the other thing I'm sad about, and I can't do it in 1, 2, 3, is I don't think doctors get as much out of the job as I did. And it's borne out by, the job has changed, I can do nothing about it. You know, when people say, let's go back to the open surgeries, I don't know which surgery you go to, but if you had an open surgery on a Monday morning, you'd need armed guards there because hundreds of people would turn up. You can't go back to that. And it's trying to get the message over. Also, the thing I don't like is, I used to like it where the contact was mainly with the GP. Things are triaged now. I mean, I am triaged. I love my GP. I'm seeing her tomorrow with friends. But I regularly talk to the pharmacist. You know, and I think, why, you know, and it's no disrespect, but if I'm ill, I want to talk to a doctor. Yeah. So you get triaged to a pharmacist, you get triaged to a physio.
And PAs.
PAs. Yeah. That's another area.
Yeah, that's the whole thing we won't get into.
We won't get into that. But when I look back on my career, you know, I can entertain you for hours telling you what I've done with my life. And when I look back, I smile. And when I think of people and the rest of it, it's the way I look back, I think of the experience I had. I think when you listen to my podcast, when she asked what song you want, it was Empty Chairs at Empty Tables. And that is my number one favourite song. And that comes, I love musicals. So whether there'll ever be Stewart Manning in a musical, I don't know, but I love musicals. So my dad, for his 60th birthday, he took us to Manchester to see Les Mis. I'm sat there and it starts. And it's so bloody miserable with, you know. And I said to him, I'm not going to sit through 2 3/4 hours. When it got to Empty Chairs at Empty Tables, there's tears pouring out. So for me, what that song means to me is that when I do what I do now, I've got my family, friends and patients who had cancer that I looked after. They're behind me. And that's kind of, so I don't think people have that experience. And I talk to young doctors and one of them said to me, oh, I didn't get any lunch then. I'm thinking, I remember working 48 hours without any food. And I'm not saying that's the right way. You talk to consultants as well. I wish there was more, dedication isn't the word, but it's not the vocation it was. And that's what is sad. You know, I speak to consultants now who say, young doctors now, they look at the clocks. You know, you're doing a ward round, it's 5:30, and they want to go home. You know, I lived in, and that's the other thing, that parts of medicine, not general practice, when they stopped junior doctors living in, they destroyed a lot of things. So now, junior doctors can only work 48 hours. When I was an SHO, I said in UCH, University College, if A&E was busy, you got called down and you dug in. And I remember that there was some really horrendous road traffic accident one Saturday. So we were down there. I wasn't supposed to be working. I was down there for about 10, 12 hours. 11 o'clock, the consultant says, right, guys, let's get some pizza. And we had a chat. And the other problem about people not living in and under pressure is that whenever I had a bad day, I could talk to somebody about it. The great problem you have now is that you can't.
Everyone's isolated.
Everyone's isolated. And that's terrible. And it goes back to when you asked me I think I think doctors particularly need mentoring. They need better mentoring. I go back to when I had my breakdown. I never talked to anybody outside my family about it.
It's the informal stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
It seems like because all the focus is on the formality, and going back to the thing that you were saying before of how people learn, and it seems like people learn much more by rote, by instruction, by like, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it's like all the information's there. You can go on to, I don't know, say YouTube or whatever, find out about whatever, but it will be step by step by step, not like do this, adapt to this, think about it.
The thing about me when I was working was that I don't know why, I got feelings about people. And I'm not saying I'm psychic, but simple things, simple example, look how the world has changed. We all have computerized notes now. Back in the day, they had Lloyd George Wallace, so if you came to see me and had never seen a doctor for umpteen years and your notes are like really thin, and you came and said, I've got indigestion, I would treat that far more seriously. And it's the truth is we put guidelines in, and the problem with guidelines is that it enables doctors refer people within certain limits. So now we've got the screening tests, 50 to 70 for poo, breast screening, whatever it is. But people can develop these things before. At the moment, I was at a conference in Harrogate last week, and the breast surgeon there was telling me that they're seeing a dramatic increase in breast cancer in younger women. Why? I don't know. There's also a dramatic increase in women with a form of lung cancer that's not smoking related. They don't know why. So it's all these things, and being a doctor is like being a detective, isn't it? You have to rule things, but you have to start out. And if somebody comes to you and says, I'm bleeding, doctor, whatever it is, don't say, well, you're only 35, you can't have bowel cancer. So it's guidelines and it's the relationship you have with people. I remember the surgery rang me, it's about 2 years now, and the practice manager said, will you ring so-and-so and so? Her dad's died and she wants to speak to you. So her dad had died and she'd moved to Windermere or somewhere. She said, I had to talk to you, Dr. Manning. So I said, okay. She said, my dad loved you. And I said, why? She said, because he'd come in, he did his blood pressure every 2 months on a Monday, you'd talk about the football. And you're thinking, yeah. So it's like, it's having the impact, isn't it? And having the ability. And it's not, they haven't got the same reasons for doing it. And I think, unfortunately, that shows over a period of time. So if I could do that change, and I think just basically try and go one step back, not back to how it was in the 60s, 70s, 80s, but and doctors are the people. The thing is, as well as patients complaining, doctors don't like it either. And it's the volume of work. Like patches is something that you may or may not have heard of, but patches is a way of sending your information into doctors. So they will come on and they might get 160 things, and they have to look at all of them and they have to decide what needs to be done. When I worked for the out of hours service, and I spent a lot of time on triage, which is talking, is that I learned how to talk to people and so if an 18-year-old single mother in Middleton rings me about an ill child, that is a completely different conversation to a teacher of 3 children in Alwoodley. And you learn how to talk to people and you learn how to empathise. And the problem is that it's the face-to-face. You have to see how people react. You have to look at people. One of the problems you have, is like I do my talk on Zoom and Teams. it's quite difficult because every time I go into a room like yesterday, I say, I'm going to talk about cancer. Has anybody here been affected by it? And occasionally people get upset, but you can read the room. And sometimes you have to end it. Sometimes so you just think, okay, and then you end it and I go and talk to the person. You can't do that on Zoom.
Yeah.
You can't. And also, particularly with mental health problems, you can't read mental health problems on Zoom, which is why there's been, so you look at people when they're there, have got eye contact, are they got hands, and you can also
jittering,
and you can see how people react, and you lose.
Well, you also get the energy off them.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and you know where to lead the conversation. Yeah. I've learned from everything I've done how to read the room, and it's different organisations. Like I think I said to you, you give a talk, you make that, and I went to talk to a group of people with learning disabilities somewhere in Leeds 14, and the guy says, you've got a difficult group today, particularly the guy over there, because he looks at his watch every minute, because he knows we get tea and a cake at half time after about 3/4 of an hour. So I was going on, and it gets to about 35 minutes, I said, I'll tell you what, let's cut it here. Let's all go and have tea and cake. So you don't make him feel, because you can cut it at any point, and it's interesting. Other ways that are interesting talking to people is that the way, when you go and talk to a group from certain communities, you have to split the men and the women, because the women won't talk up in front of the men, which happened at the Hamara Centre. So we gave our talk to the men first, who weren't interested in carry on playing snooker or pot. We gave it to the women. They were really engaged, and to an interpreter, and the first question I got was, can you ask the doctor if he believes COVID vaccinations cause cancer? At which point I wanted to hide under the table. But so it's just experience, and I love what I've done. I think I had a lot of experience, but in time, my experience didn't count for things, because, again, I had medical students for 25 years, communication skills. They'd come 4 successive Mondays and we'd talk and the rest of it. So after about 25 years, I get a phone call from the deanery. Dr. Manning, we have a problem with you and the students. Yeah, what is it? You never did the training course. So I said, okay, if you want, we can get you in the course in Ripon for 2 weeks in the summer. And I said, no thanks. And I said, have you had any bad reports? No. I said, no, it's the policy now. I did occupational work for many years. And then the General Medical Council, somebody complained, nothing happened to it, but they said, Dr. Manning, do you have any, this was somebody that I come across in my occupational work. I said, Dr. Manning, do you have any formal qualifications in occupational work? I said, no, you can't do it anymore. And it was a pity, because I'd done more occupational work. Leeds United, Lewis's, Hoyer's Transport, Burton's, I only went to work at Lewis's because the pay wasn't very good. But 1, you could eat what you wanted in the canteen, and 2, I had a 10% discount card.
Oh, yeah. Bonus. So I'm going to wrap it up there. If there's anything that you want to add, say, now is your time. Do you know all the links and stuff for the socials, or should I just put them in the show notes? So for the
do what you want with it.
Yeah, so I'll put a list of all the links. If there's anything else that you want me to add in there, put them in there.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, good. So I'm just going to say thank you very much for your time, and the massive amounts of time it's taken us.
It's only taken 3.5 hours. But you can understand why, because I can talk for it. It's like, it's up to you to chop out the bits that you want. It's like the podcast. The podcast was different because she'd asked, it wasn't done, it was done.
Was it like an hour interview for that?
It was half an hour.
Half an hour.
But she'd given me all the things before, but I much prefer talking to people, and I'd rather talk more, and you choose the relevant bits.
Yeah.
And then when I'm 80, in 5 years' time, if I'm still here, you can come back and we'll say, how has the world changed since you're 18? You can watch me change my incontinence bags and the rest.
Well, we'll put that on video.
Yeah.
Thank you again to Stewart for being my guest. Thanks as always to all my guests, and thank you to you, Leeds, for being my subject. If you've not subbed on the YouTube channel for Working Hours, please do it now, because it's still on 19 and I still hate that. Let's hit 20. Don't forget to donate to the project. If you're listening to this on the Captivate player, you can just hit the donate button on the player itself, and that will take you to the show's Ko-fi page. Or go harder, go further, and commit to the show by taking on some of our running costs, or some of my running costs even. If I can afford it, you can too, and help me to keep it going. We still have to get to 200 episodes. That's a long way off still, and there's a lot more free labour I've got to do for you, listener. Anything you do donate will be a massive help. If you want to chuck in a meaningful way, Patreon memberships start at £6 a month. That's less than the price of anything you would buy an hour of in the real, and I'm giving you hours of local historical content each month. £6 is basically a craft beer a month for all of this content. Patreon.com/C for Charlie/working hours pod. If you would like to contact me about anything working hours related, then you can email me about the show at workinghourspod@western-studios.com. Okay, that's me. Remember, listener, no matter what you do, it's impossible for you to understand anything that your salary depends on you not understanding. So try to work for peace and try to plan with kindness. Raise your voice, but reduce your impact. Cheers, ears. Take care out there and be kind to each other, Leeds. Working Hours is produced, recorded, edited, created and published by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org. Remember Western Studios Leeds Limited when you're ready to start making your content in West Yorkshire. Follow Western Studios Leeds on Facebook, facebook.com/Western_Studios_Leeds, and on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/Western-Studios. Bookmark western-studios.com so you can see the latest prices and use my contact page to drop me a message about your own podcast project or working hours at any time from anywhere. Maybe you want or need a podcast host, co-host or narrator for your podcast project. Maybe you just need another voice for one or more episodes of your show. Podcasts are so much more than gossip, book promotions and marketing for online courses. Podcasts and other audio content get your online brand out there. Want to make some fundraising case studies? Want to have an audiobook or video course? Want to share your learning, knowledge and expertise in your field? Want to learn, teach or raise awareness of something general or particular? Want to improve internal comms with messages your staff might actually engage with? Or do you just want to brighten up the world with some entertaining content? Then make a podcast. If you're making your podcast within West Yorkshire, then think about making it with western-studios.com. Whatever your podcast questions or needs, get in touch with Western Studios Leeds.